These 5 terrifying stories of urban legends from New Mexico that locals swear are absolutely true will leave you speechless. The phantom hitchhiker on Highway 47. She whispers your name as she fades from the back seat and you realize you never hit the brakes. That's how drivers describe the chilling moment the phantom hitchhiker disappears. And no matter how many times people tell this story, one thing never changes: the look of pure terror on the face of those who saw her. This legend haunts Highway 47 near Tom Hill, where multiple locals claim to have picked up a young woman wearing a torn white dress, barefoot with long dark hair. She looks lost, she looks scared, she always gives an address near the cemetery. Then somewhere along the drive, she vanishes, leaving behind an icy cold seat, the scent of wet earth, or sometimes a personal item like a scarf or a bracelet. One driver claimed he found the scarf on a headstone the next morning. Now this isn't just a ghost story passed around for laughs. Police logs and community message boards over the years show consistent reports of a girl seen walking alone late at night on that same stretch of road. Some call it folklore, others are convinced she's real. They say she was a teen that was unalived in a hit and run while fleeing an abusive relationship decades ago, and she's still looking for someone to get her home safely. The most terrifying part? Well, many drivers say they felt fine at first until she whispered something that made no sense at all, something like, "He's still out there," and then vanishes. No trace, no sound, just silence, followed by a sense of overwhelming dread that stayed with them for days. Malahora. Now you're driving alone, it's close to midnight. Suddenly, a figure appears in the road, tall, shrouded in black, unmoving. You can't see her face. Your headlights flicker. You hit the brakes, but everything freezes. You try to scream, but nothing comes out. Well, that's La Malahora, the evil hour. Now this horrifying entity appears in remote parts of New Mexico, particularly along back roads near the Rio Grande. Now witnesses say she manifests as a shadowy woman with a veil, or as a shifting black mist. Now her presence is an omen. If you see her, something terrible is about to happen, and if she gets close to you, there's literally no turning back. Now one woman driving back from Santa Fe describes seeing La Malahora standing at a crossroad, her black cloak kind of billowing despite the still air. She didn't stop, but when she got home, she found out her brother had passed away right around the exact same time that she passed the spirit. The earliest known versions of this legend date back to the early 1900s. Some believe La Malahora is a demon, others think, she's the spirit of a woman who lost her children to war or plague and now punishes those who cross her path. Whatever she is, the stories all agree on one thing: she shows up right before someone passes away, and she never appears twice to the same person. The demon dog Skinwalker of La Cruces. Now it wasn't a dog, it wasn't a wolf, it wasn't anything that should exist. That's what Carlos, a 19-year-old college student from La Cruces, said after something chased him through the desert at 2:14 a.m. one night in 2015. He was heading home from a friend's house when he heard heavy footsteps behind him, too fast to be human, too loud to be a dog, so he turned and saw it. Black fur, long limbs, yellow eyes that kind of glowed in the dark. It was running upright and it was laughing. Local folklore calls it the demon dog, but others believe it's just a skinwalker or a shapeshifter from Navajo legend, now said to be kind of a witch who uses dark magic to become a beast. Now the skinwalker myth is sacred, feared, and rarely spoken of in public, but in southern New Mexico, people have reported seeing creatures that match its description for years. A rancher outside of La Cruces reported finding 14 of his goats mutilated overnight. No red liquid, no footprints. Surveillance cameras recorded only static and a deep growling noise before cutting off completely. When he checked the pen the next morning, the locks were still intact, but the goats were scattered and torn apart as if something flew in and out. Now another local swears the creature followed him home. He saw it standing near the tree line at the edge of his property. That night, his dogs barked non-stop and he heard scratching at his window. In the morning, claw marks were etched into the glass. He moved out a week later. I don't blame him. The demon dog doesn't just, hunt, it kind of plays with you. It mimics your voice, it draws you in, and when you're isolated, scared, and alone, that's when it strikes.
Whew, here's another historical doozy, and that's the start of the Tuskegee syphilis study in 1932. So black men in Alabama volunteered to undergo special treatment for bad human redness. They had seen signs in their neighborhood claiming that the government and the county health department would treat them, but what they didn't know was that they were actually signing up to be part of a study of untreated syphilis amongst black men. The purpose of the study was to observe the effects of the disease when untreated, though by the end of the study, medical advancements meant it was entirely treatable. Now, these men were not informed of the nature of the experiment, and more than 100 died as a result. There were 399 men who were diagnosed with syphilis and made to believe they would receive treatment for any symptoms of their bad fluids. Doctors in the area were told not to treat those in the study. Just examine them, observe them. These men were initially told that the experiment was only going to be like 6 months, but it was extended to 40 years. After funding for the treatment was lost, the study was continued without informing the men that they would never be treated. None of the infected men were ever treated with penicillin, despite the fact that by like 1947, the antibiotic was widely available and was the standard treatment for syphilis. The study continued under numerous public health service supervisors until 1972, when a leak to the press resulted in its termination on November 16th of that year. Its revelation led to the 1979 Belmont Report and to the establishment of the Office for Human Research Protections, and federal laws and regulations requiring institutional review boards for the protection of human subjects in studies. Now that whole office manages this responsibility within the United States Department of Health and Human Services. It wasn't until May 16th of 1997 when President at the time, Bill Clinton, formally apologized on behalf of the United States to the victims of the study, calling it shameful, racist, and so forth. And in our final legend for today, did you know that there's actual alien debris buried in the desert of New Mexico? The Atari video game, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, failed so miserably that the company buried unsold cartridges in a desert landfill. Wait, well, what do you think I meant? Real aliens? In New Mexico? We would have opened today with this if I was talking about bodies, folks. So this whole burial was a mass burial of a lot of unsold video game cartridges, consoles, and computers in a landfill site, and this was all done by Atari in 1983. Since the burial was first reported, there were a lot of doubts as to, like, really? Did somebody actually bury a bunch of video games in the desert? And for a while, and for a very long while, it was just an urban legend. This was like a cultural icon and a reminder of the video game crash of 1983. It was the end result of a disastrous fiscal year which saw Atari being sold off by its parent company, Warner Communications. And though it was believed that millions of copies of this game were buried, officials later verified that it was like around 700,000. And it was various games, but E.T. was one of them. Well, in 2014, Fuel Industries, Microsoft, and others worked with the New Mexico government to excavate the site as part of a documentary, Atari Game Over. And on April 26 of 2014, well, the excavation revealed a lot of discarded games and hardware. Now, it wasn't everything that was found. About like 1,300 cartridges were recovered, with a portion given for curation to museums, and then the rest auctioned to raise money for a museum to commemorate the burial. And the documentary, which features all of this, came out in November of that year. During the height of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, 10 years removed from MKUltra and the illegal experiments performed by the CIA in that project, a new game showed up at arcades over in Portland, Oregon. The game had a plain black cabinet and featured a series of puzzles in different colors and geometric shapes. It didn't really have a name, but it was periodically serviced by different pairs of men in black suits. The game was pretty addictive, and those who played it afterwards tended to have a lot of amnesia. Stories say that at least 2 folks disappeared after playing it, and there's been a lot of other folks that came forward claiming to have been abducted by men in suits after playing. This game, which came to be called Polybius by those who knew of it, borrowing the name of the Greek historian famous for relying on first-hand accounts, disappeared as suddenly as it appeared. Take for instance Bobby Feldstein, who claims he was abducted one afternoon after playing the game at Coin Kingdom and experienced a lot of mind-altering side effects. Allegedly, he was led through a series of underground tunnels similar to the tunnels of Portland's Shanghai lore, and was found the next day more than 60 miles from his house in the middle of the forest. There was another boy with him apparently, one who rescued him. And there's been many other stories like his. But nowadays, Feldstein gives walking tours around Portland that attempt to authenticate his experience by returning to the former basement of Coin Kingdom. He claims the ordeal of the abduction ruined his life, telling a lot of folks doing a tour is a way to to exorcise my demons on a daily basis. So nowadays, there's a lot of questions around how is this allowed to happen, and will it ever happen again? Ever hear about the toxic lady? Gloria Ramirez was an ordinary woman living in Riverside, California with a couple of descendants and a husband. A lot of her friends were like, yeah, she's friendly, she's a jokester, everybody loves her, but this all changed on February 19th of 1994 when Gloria was rushed to General Hospital in Riverside. That night, Gloria was battling a very rapid heartbeat and a drop in pressure. She could hardly breathe, and she also was answering questions in the form of incoherent sentences. Now, to make all of this even more unusual, she was just 31, but she had late-stage cervical cancer and was deteriorating pretty quickly when she got to the ER and passed less than an hour later. But here's the thing, she had a bit of a weird effect on the hospital staff. A lot of folks who treated her suffered from odd symptoms. We're talking fainting, shortness of breath, even temporary paralysis. 5 workers required hospitalization, at least one of whom remained in intensive care for 2 weeks after. So the medical staff, they took care of her. They gave her diazepam, lorazepam, everything to sedate her. And when it became clear that Ramirez was responding poorly to treatment, folks tried to defibrillate her, everything that you're supposed to do. But then they noticed an oily substance covering her body. Other folks noted a fruity garlic-like odor that they thought was coming from her mouth. So like I mentioned before, the poor thing passed away, and a team wearing hazmat suits performed her autopsy. But they couldn't explain why everybody else had fallen ill. A lot of folks were like, okay, it's mass hysteria. Until the coroner's office found that Ramirez had been trying to treat herself with dimethyl sulfone cream. When exposed to oxygen, this creates a vapor that affects people like poison gas. COINTELPRO, which is in a way a short form for counterintelligence program, was a series of covert and illegal projects conducted between 1956 and 1971 by the FBI that were aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting American political organizations that the FBI perceived as subversive. So groups and individuals targeted by the FBI included feminist organizations, the Communist Party, anti-Vietnam War organizers, activists in the civil rights and Black Power movements, folks like Martin Luther King Jr., the Nation of Islam, the Black Panther Party, environmentalist and animal rights organizations, independence movements including Puerto Rican independence groups such as the Young Lords and the Puerto Rican Socialist Party, and more. Although the program primarily focused on organizations that were part of the broader New Left, they also targeted white supremacist groups such as the National States Rights Party and a more popular group that you'd normally list off by their initials, but we shouldn't say that, the white guys in the pointy white outfits. You know what I mean. The FBI has used covert operations against domestic political groups since its inception. However, covert operations under the official COINTELPRO label took place between 1956 to 71. However, the official chronology of the program is kind of a subject of debate. According to a Senate investigation, if this had been a short-lived abomination, the thorny problems of motivation, techniques, and control presented might be safely relegated to history. But seeing as this organization existed for years on a quiet basis before the formal programs were instituted, and more significantly, these types of activities might actually continue to today under the rubric of investigation. A lot of the tactics used are alleged to have seen continued use, including discrediting targets through psychological warfare, smearing individuals and groups using forged documents, and by planting false reports in the media, harassment, wrongful imprisonment, illegal violence, and, well, taking them out. According to a Senate report, the FBI's motivation was protecting national security, preventing violence, maintaining the existing social and political order. FBI Director Hoover at the time issued directives governing this whole organization, ordering FBI agents to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of these movements and especially their leaders. Under Hoover, the official in charge of all of this was Assistant Director William C. Sullivan. Now, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy personally authorized a lot of these programs, giving written approval for limited wiretapping of Martin Luther King's phones on a trial basis for a month or so. Hoover extended the clearance so his men were unshackled to look for evidence in any areas of King's life that they deemed worthy.
Krogan Graange, a country estate in England, became the site of an attack that would haunt local memory for generations. A woman named Bridget, who lived at the estate, claimed she woke in the middle of the night to find a terrifying figure in her bedroom. The intruder had a pale face, sharp teeth, and a thirst that drove it to attack her while she slept. She managed to actually fend off the creature using a poker, leaving deep scratches on its face. Now, the figure reportedly fled, but the family later found red marks leading from the room into the surrounding woods. Several nights later, the vampire returned, attacking attacking other household members and leaving similar terrifying evidence. Locals conducted searches, found footprints, and even reportedly saw the creature at a distance. Scholars and folklorists, studying Krogan Graange became or believed it could have been a combination of mental illness, rabid animal attacks, and of course superstition. But the intensity and detail of the victims' accounts have kept the legend alive. Some reports even include journal entries and letters detailing the terror, which remain archived in local historical societies. The Krogan Graange vampire is chilling because it blends the domestic and the supernatural, unlike the distant crypts of other legends. This vampire invaded the home, preying on ordinary people at night. The psychological effect on the household is well documented, and descendants of the family have confirmed oral histories that corroborate the attacks. Krogan Graange is not a story of legend alone, it is a warning, and warnings are easy to ignore until someone like Bellakus turns them into reality. Europe in the early 20th century was not only haunted by superstition, it was stalked by an exterminator who blurred the line between myth and carnage. In his hands, the darkness became tangible, the undead literal, and the line between folklore and true horror vanished entirely. And so this brings us to the Bellakus vampire crimes. This is Hungary's real-life monster. Now, in 1916, Hungary became the stage for a real-life vampire slayer, Bellakus, a serial assassinator who lured young women to his workshop under the pretense of marriage. He kept them in metal barrels filled with alcohol, where they eventually passed away, obviously. And he reportedly drank their red liquid to prolong his own life. Now, authorities uncovered this horrifying secret years later when they investigated his abandoned property and discovered the barrels, each containing a corpse with signs of attempted preservation. Now, Kiss disappeared before his arrest, but speculation about his vampire, tendencies persisted. Reports from neighbors describe his obsession with vital fluids, strange nocturnal behavior, and apparent longevity despite his advancing age. Now, his case blends criminal reality with vampire myth, and it shocked Europe when discovered. Modern criminologists cite Bellakus as one of the first documented examples of a serial executioner explicitly linked to vampire practices. So the horror of Kiss is grounded in reality, unlike folklore. These crimes left physical evidence, police records, and terrified witnesses. His legend persists in Hungary with books, documentaries, and local lore warning of the vampire in the barrels who, may have evaded justice entirely. So, from London's misty cemeteries to the hidden workshops in Hungary, these tales remind us that vampires are more than fiction. They are the echoes of fear, the shadows, of the human imagination made flesh, and sometimes the very real horrors that refuse to stay buried. Whether you dismiss them as superstition or, steel yourself with reason, remember, every shadow in the dark could be watching. Every heartbeat in the silence could belong to something that will never truly fade. The Highgate vampire, London's hunter. Now, in the 1970s, London's Highgate Cemetery became the setting of one of the most infamous modern vampire legends. It began with a series of sightings and grave desecrations that terrified locals. Witnesses described a tall, gaunt figure dressed in black with fiery red eyes and a face both skeletal and human, seen roaming the cemetery at night. People claim they felt a very oppressive, cold presence that made their skin basically crawl and hearts pound. This story took hold when a man named David Farron, a local occult enthusiast, reported a terrifying encounter. He described standing in the moonlight among toppled headstones when he came face to face with the vampire. Now, the figure allegedly floated rather than walked, and its red eyes seemed to pierce into his very soul. Neighbors reported hearing strange noises like anguished cries and the sound of digging echoing through the cemetery's misty paths. The legend escalated when multiple graves were exhumed. Now, some coffins were found disturbed, bodies allegedly showing signs of liquid loss, which experts tried to rationalize as decomposition anomalies. Yet, locals whispered of the impossible. Now, the press, sensationalized the story, dubbing it the Highgate vampire, and the legend exploded internationally. Now, paranormal researchers flocked to the cemetery, attempting rituals to banish the creature, while tourists and thrill seekers began kind of sneaking into the grounds at night, hoping for a glimpse of the undead. Now, Highgate's story combines eyewitness testimony, alleged physical evidence, and the classic human fascination with the unknown. Whether skeptic or believer, the fear is instilled, and it's very real. Locals remain terrified for decades, claiming the vampire still roamed the dark corners of the cemetery long after the initial sightings. As you leave the fog-choked paths of Highgate behind, the thought lingers, what if the monsters aren't confined to old cemeteries? eyes. Mercy Brown, the Rhode Island vampire. Now, in 1892, a small town in Rhode Island became obsessed with the idea that vampires were responsible for a tuberculosis outbreak that had basically decimated several families. Among the most famous cases was Mercy Brown, a young woman whose demise from the disease sparked panic. Tuberculosis, then called consumption, was poorly understood, and the community blamed the disease on restless spirits of the deceased feeding on the living. Now, Mercy's mother, fearing the ongoing passings in their family, convinced local authorities to exhume Mercy's body, and when the grave was opened, her body was reportedly well preserved. Locals claimed her eyes were open and her flesh appeared fresh. They removed her heart and liver, burned them in ashes, and mixed them with water, which her sick brother was forced to drink in the hope of curing him. He had, passed on shortly thereafter, obviously. Now, the Mercy Brown case is particularly haunting because it is one of the last documented instances of a vampire exhumation, in the United States. Now, newspapers at the time covered the story extensively, capturing public fear and fascination. Scholars studying the case note that the, preservation of her body was due to cold winter soil and burial techniques, yet the townspeople response, reflects how fear and superstition can manifest in gruesome rituals. The ashes of Mercy Brown's heart tell one story, but in Eastern Europe, the tale of the living deceased has older, darker roots. Arnold Paole, Serbia's bloodthirsty deceased. Now, the story of Arnold originates in early 18th century Serbia, where the Ottoman Empire's records document one of Europe's first official vampire cases. Arnold, a soldier, reportedly passed away after being bitten by a vampire in his village. Soon after, villagers claimed to see him walking again at night, attacking others and drinking their body liquid, of course. Now, reports describe villagers hearing strange noises outside their homes, finding corpses supposedly torn and drained, and experiencing panic that spread through nearby towns. Authorities eventually exhumed Arnold's body. Witnesses stated the corpse appeared unusually fresh and displayed signs that would later become classic, vampire evidence. Red liquid at the mouth, a swollen body, and flexible limbs. Now, local superstition dictated that, he was staked kind of through the heart. When the procedure was done, villagers claimed the attacks ceased and, normalcy kind of returned. Now, Arnold's case is well documented in court and government reports, making it one of the earliest formal investigations into vampire phenomena. Now, the accounts were detailed, including descriptions of symptoms, villagers' testimonies, and the supernatural aura surrounding the body. Now, historians consider it a combination of folklore, fear of disease, and actual rituals. Yet for locals at the time, the vampire threat was as real as any soldier in the night. You might think these horrors belong to distant lands, places untouched by modern life, but Krogan Graange attacks prove otherwise. Sometimes the monster comes not from the graveyards or the forest, but from the very rooms where you sleep. The night hides more than shadows, and a predator can kind of slip past the door while you lie unaware, listening to the tick of the clock and the beat of your own heart. The modern investigators and the new hauntings. Now, in 2016, the ranch was sold again, this time to a businessman named Brandon Fugel, who decided to reopen the investigation using cutting-edge technology. Now, he hired scientists, engineers, and ex-military personnel to record everything. Drones, heat sensors, ground-penetrating radar, nothing was off the table. Almost immediately, the team began capturing strange events. Drones malfunctioned over certain parts of the ranch, batteries drained instantly, cameras picked up heat signatures moving across the fields with no visible source, instruments recorded bursts of radiation that came and went within seconds. Now, during one experiment, the team launched a weather balloon. Moments later, a glowing object appeared on their radar, hovering directly above it. As the balloon ascended, the object mirrored its movements. Then, both vanished. Another night, the crew watched as a bright orb appeared in the sky, split into two, and darted off in the opposite direction at impossible speed. They captured it on multiple cameras. Now, these events became the focus of televised investigations and new documentaries. Now, while skeptics argue, the show's dramatic editing inflates the mystery, even scientists on site admitted they couldn't explain many of the anomalies. Whatever's out there seems to know when it's being watched, and it doesn't like the cameras. The encounters beyond the ranch. Now, the legend isn't contained, by property lines. Across Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada, the same eerie encounters repeat. Truck drivers on desert highways report seeing tall, emaciated creatures sprinting alongside their vehicles before vanishing. Campers describe hearing voices that sound exactly like their loved ones calling them from the woods, even when those people are hundreds of miles away. Hunters tell stories of, coyotes that stand back and smile, and in the Four Corners region, a group of friends camping near Monument Valley saw a figure moving on all fours through the sand. When their flashlight hit it, it bolted upright, human-shaped but wrong. Its limbs bent backward, it screeched, it ran faster than any animal should, and disappeared into the night. Now, ranchers continue to find their livestock deceased in bizarre ways, tongues removed, organs missing, no sign of struggle or blood. One farmer in Arizona reported hearing his cattle crying in the night. When he arrived at the corral, one cow was missing. The next morning, he found it half a mile away, drained of all of his red liquid, eyes removed, clearly, very surgical cuts. Locals across the region still swear that skinwalkers roam the desert, slipping between worlds. They say if you see glowing eyes on the horizon or hear someone calling your name when no one's around, don't answer, because once it knows you've heard it, it'll never forget your voice. So the skinwalker phenomena is one of the strangest, intersections of culture, science, and fear. It's part Navajo taboo, part rural horror, part unsolved mystery, backed by decades of strange data. Scientists, military officials, and ordinary families have all tried to make sense of it, but nobody's come close to explaining it completely. Skeptics say it's misidentified wildlife, paranoia, or deliberate hoaxes. Believers say it's something far older, a curse born from human darkness itself. Whatever the truth is, one thing is clear: skinwalkers' stories aren't going away. Every new witness adds another layer to a mystery that refuses to end. And maybe that's the real fear, that some legends don't need to be proven true to haunt us. They just need to keep us telling them. The Sherman Wolf and the Cursed Ranch. It's 1994. A quiet family buys a ranch in Utah's Uinta Basin. Now, for a few peaceful weeks, everything seems normal until one evening, a massive wolf-like creature appears near the corral. It's 3 times the size of a normal wolf, with glowing red eyes and a calmness that chills them. Terry Sherman, the ranch's owner, grabs his rifle and fires at the creature at point-blank range. The bullets hit, but the wolf doesn't even flinch. It just turns and walks away like nothing happened. That's how the nightmare began. Soon, the Shermans were dealing with mutilated cattle, surgically precise cuts, organs missing, no red liquid. They'd see, floating lights moving across the property, hovering, then vanishing. Their dogs growled at empty air. Heavy footsteps circled the house at night, and sometimes something unseen watched them from the tree line, close enough that they could actually hear its breathing. Terry's wife, Gwen, started keeping detailed notes of the incidents. The activity was constant and terrifying. Doors slamming, equipment destroyed, their animals vanishing overnight. After just 18 months, they were desperate to leave. When they finally did, they sold the ranch and went public with their story. Reporters visited the site, scientists took interest, and soon this patch of land became known worldwide as Skinwalker Ranch. To this day, locals near this basin claim the area is cursed. Hikers report seeing wolves with human eyes, metallic lights zipping through the sky, and humanoid shadows that vanish when approached. The billionaire who tried to prove it. After the Shermans left, the ranch caught the attention of a billionaire named Robert Bigelow. Now, the same man behind a space research company. He actually bought the property in 1996 and founded a scientific group to investigate. This wasn't some ghost hunting show, it was actually a real operation. Cameras, sensors, night vision gear, scientists, military consultants, all living on the ranch, documenting everything. They recorded flying orbs that disassembled into smaller lights, equipment that suddenly failed when something invisible passes by, cows found deceased in broad daylight with strange burn marks. Security guards claimed to see shadowy humanoid shapes crawling across fields. Now, researchers found magnetic field spikes, radiation bursts, and heat signatures of unseen beings. One night, cameras caught an orb hovering just above the ground. Moments later, a cow nearby was found deceased, untouched, except for a single hole through its eye. No red liquid, no tracks, no explanation. Now, for years, the team collected data, but every time they set up instruments, the phenomenon would happen just out of range. It was as if something knew it was being watched and didn't want to be caught. Eventually, Bigelow's team moved out, exhausted and shaken, but the reports, basically circulated through government circles and caught the interest of military officials. That's when Skinwalker Ranch went from paranormal curiosity to national security concern. Some of that research would later influence government-funded studies into unexplained aerial phenomena, what we now call UAPs. The Navajo curse and the thing that mimics voices. Before any of that, long before the ranch even existed, Native people in the region had already a name for these beings. The Navajo call them the Yi-Naladushi, which means with it, he goes on all fours. Now, according to Navajo belief, a skinwalker is a witch who breaks sacred taboos to gain dark powers, often by committing unthinkable acts. They can shapeshift into animals or move impossibly fast and mimic human voices. The legend isn't entertainment, it's honestly very serious. Now, among the Navajo, even saying the word aloud can invite its attention in. There are thousands of personal encounters. A woman driving home late at night sees a coyote running alongside her car at 60 miles per hour. When she speeds up, it does too, keeping eye contact the entire time. A man on the reservation hears his mother calling him from the outside, but when he opens the door, he sees only a tall, thin figure crouched in the dark wearing his mother's face. Others tell of hearing their own names whispered from the tree line or seeing a deer stand upright on two legs before vanishing. Dogs bark at invisible figures. People find strange animal tracks that morph into human footprints halfway across the dirt. For outsiders, these stories might sound like folklore, but within Navajo communities, they're part of lived experience. Families perform protective rituals, avoid certain paths at night, and never whistle after dark. Elders say skinwalkers aren't ghosts or cryptids, they're people who chose evil, and that's what makes them the most terrifying. The Hermit of the North Pond. Now, in the woods of Maine, campers whispered about a shadow that moved between the trees at night. Someone or something was stealing food, stealing flashlights, batteries, etc. Locals called him the North Pond Hermit. Now, for years, it was dismissed as folklore. But then, in 2013, police caught him. His name was actually Christopher Knight, and he had been living alone in the forest for, get this, nearly 27 years. Yes, 27 years without speaking to another person ever, surviving entirely by sneaking into cabins and campsites, stealing just enough food and supplies to live, like canned goods, propane, clothing, tools, like whatever he could basically get his hands on. Residents would arrive for the summer and find their cupboards empty or their batteries just mysteriously gone and missing. I mean, some just kind of thought it was raccoons, maybe a bear, others swore that it was probably a ghost. I mean, in truth, it was literally just a man who had vanished from society at the age of 20 and somehow managed to stay hidden for almost 3 decades. That's insane. When he was finally arrested, police found a very elaborate hidden camp deep in the woods, complete with a tent, shelves, books, and even cooking supplies. Knight admitted that, he committed over 1,000 burglaries during his time in isolation. Now, for generations, locals had warned each other about the man in the woods. They said he watched campers as they slept, which is terrifying. And they said he came out, but only at night. And they were right. I mean, the legend of the hermit wasn't just true, it was, standing in handcuffs, kind of blinking into the daylight for the first time in a quarter century. Rats in the toilet bowl. Now, it's in the middle of the night, you stumble to the bathroom, half asleep, flip up the toilet lid, and staring back at you from the water is a living, hissing rat. It sounds like a nightmare, right? But this urban legend has been proven true time and time again. Rats really can swim through sewer pipes. They can navigate, bends in the plumbing and emerge straight through your toilet. So in countless cities around the world, plumbers have confirmed cases of residents finding live rats splashing in their bowls, especially in older buildings where the pipes are connected directly to the main sewer lines. Rats are built for this. I mean, they can tread water for days. They can hold their breath for minutes at a time and flatten their bodies like so tight to squeeze through openings barely larger than a quarter. Once they sense food or even just the warmth of a home, they'll follow the trail right up the pipe system. New York City sanitation workers have documented rats traveling the length of entire buildings through pipes, emerging in bathrooms like something out of a horror movie. I mean, one resident recalled hearing splashing, looking down, and then locking eyes with a rat clawing its way out. That's terrifying. It's the kind of legend that used to make people laugh, but until you realize it can happen anywhere, even to you. And that faint gurgle in your pipes, well, maybe it isn't the plumbing after all. So next time you're on the toilet, just take a double look. Cropsy, the Staten Island boogeyman. Now, for decades, Staten Island children were terrified of one name, Cropsy. Now, parents warned their kids not to wander off, saying that, Cropsy would snatch them from the woods. He was actually said to be a deformed madman living in the tunnels of an abandoned asylum. But Cropsy wasn't just a story. No. In the 1970s and the 1980s, a real man named Andre Rand stalked the same woods that inspired this legend. Rand had once worked as a custodian at the Willowbrook State School, a massive and nightmarish institution for children with disabilities. Now, after the school shut down, he began living in a very makeshift kind of campsite around the decaying property. Over time, children began to just disappear. One by one, families searched, communities panicked, and the whispers of, Cropsy started to spread. Then, in 1987, the body of a 12-year-old girl named Jennifer Schwieger was found buried near the ruins of Willowbrook. Rand was arrested for her abduction and later convicted. Now, locals were horrified at how closely the details of that legend matched reality. A deranged man, an abandoned institution, children vanishing in the middle of the night. I mean, the stories they once told to scare kids into coming home at before dark or before the lights went off were suddenly horrifyingly real. For those who grew up in Staten Island, Cropsy wasn't just a bedtime story anymore. I mean, he was the man who lived just beyond the tree line, and he was very real. The Leaping Lawyer of Toronto. Now, it started as an office party trick. A lawyer wanted to prove just how strong the skyscraper windows were in his building. So, in front of literally everybody, he ran full force like Naruto ran and slammed his body against the glass. It didn't break. He laughed. Everyone laughed. It kind of became like his little signature stunt, like a little party trick, until one day it literally took his life. So his name was Gary Hoy. He was a very respected attorney in Toronto. On a summer afternoon back in 1993 during a tour for visiting law students, he basically decided again he was going to show off, this unbreakable window once again. He threw himself against the 24th floor glass, and as before, the pane didn't shatter. But this time, the entire window frame popped out of the wall. So Hoy plunged 24 stories to his demise. Engineers later confirmed that the glass itself hadn't broken. It did hold perfectly, so he wasn't wrong there. The frame just simply failed, pulling clean out of its casing. One freak accident, but the result was a horror story that spread like wildfire. I remember hearing about it and not even believing it, but it really is real. And the legend of the lawyer who threw himself through a window to prove how strong it was became one of those stories that everyone repeats, but this one wasn't exaggerated. Literally every word of it is true, and if you grew up in Toronto, I'm sure you've heard of it. The body under the bed. A couple checks into a cheap hotel, so we'll call it a motel. Everything seems fine until a very strange smell fills the room. Now, they complain to the front desk, who then sends someone to kind of go spray some air freshener, a quick cover up. The smell lingers, obviously, because those don't work. And eventually, one of them looks under the bed and screams. Underneath the mattress lies a deceased body. This story is so shocking that most people assume it's an urban legend. But, it's happened repeatedly in real life across multiple hotels, motels, and cities. One of the most infamous cases took place in Memphis, Tennessee, when the body of a missing woman was found stuffed inside the bed frame of a budget lodge room weeks after she disappeared. Now, guests had slept in the same room for days and weeks, sometimes even complaining about the odor without realizing what was beneath them. Another similar discovery happened in Las Vegas, where a couple noticed a very foul smell in their motel room. When cleaning staff lifted the mattress, they uncovered a corpse wrapped in plastic. These are not isolated incidents, unfortunately. They're reoccurring horrors that prove that this legend has a lot of truth to it. The thought alone is sickening. How many times have travelers unknowingly slept inches above a hidden crime scene? So next time you check into a hotel and the room smells, a little off, maybe take a look under the bed. I know I'll be doing that going forward.
Number 3, no one is declared dead on Disney property. Disney can apparently claim that no one has ever died at one of their theme parks because they always ensure that accident victims are removed from the park property before being declared dead. This legend is based upon the very specific and often confusing distinction between actual death and declared death. For example, if a seriously injured victim of an automobile accident were loaded into an ambulance and died en route to the hospital, he or she generally would not be officially declared dead until they arrived at the hospital and were examined by a doctor. The difference in time between the actual physical death of the patient and the declaration of death by the doctor is the discrepancy on which this legend runs. So the claim here is not that no one has actually, ever died on Disney theme park property, but whether Disney can legitimately make the claim that no one has ever died at a Disney park because they ensure that any declaration of death takes place outside of park property. So does Disney really attempt to, get injured or already dead persons off their property before any declaration of death occurs? Obviously, they're not going to put out some PR statement and be like, oh yeah, totally. But some former Disney employees have reported that the no one dies on Disney property is indeed a company policy. That is suggested in the book Inside the Mouse. If guests have the nerve to die, they wait until they've crossed the line and can do so safely off the property. In all fairness, however, it should be noted that in some jurisdictions, once paramedics begin life-saving efforts, they cannot discontinue those efforts until the patient has been transported to a medical facility, even if the patient is obviously no longer with us. And the sprawling size and relative isolation of the Walt Disney World complex in Florida make it kind of, imperative that persons in need of urgent medical attention be loaded into helicopters and transported to hospitals ASAP. So the combination of those two factors makes it rather unlikely that anyone would actually be declared dead on Walt Disney World property, regardless of how the Walt Disney Company, wants to be perceived. Disney is well known for their image consciousness. They've been criticized in the past for policies such as not allowing marked emergency vehicles into their parks so as not to upset park guests, and so many people perceive them as being willing and overzealous enough to stretch a pretty semantic point for a minor public relations advantage. So while I think I can call this urban legend true, it's more of a technicality than anything nefarious. Or maybe I just fell for the propaganda. Number 2, ashes galore. Trust me, I was tempted to move into the Haunted Mansion when I visited. I wrote it as many times as I could, but I don't have any plans to actually make it my resting place after I leave this world, even though I would blend in. For years and years, the Haunted Mansion has been home to an endless supply of Disney myths and legends, including sightings of more than one real ghost and a dispute as to whether Walt Disney himself is one of the singing busts. But the attraction's most prevalent and persistent rumor is that guests regularly spread the remains of their friends and family inside the ride. And unlike some of the stuff I'll mention today that could be up for debate, this is 100% true. The Wall Street Journal of all publications did an expose on the practice and found that spreading ashes at both Disneyland and Walt Disney World is a common occurrence that isn't just limited to the Haunted Mansion. Human ashes have been spread in flower beds, on bushes, and on Magic Kingdom lawns, outside the park gates and during fireworks displays, on Pirates of the Caribbean, and in the moat underneath the flying elephants of the Dumbo ride. Most frequently of all, though, according to custodians and park workers, they've been dispersed throughout the Haunted Mansion. The 49-year-old attraction featuring an eerie old estate full of imaginary ghosts. According to a former Disneyland custodian, the Haunted Mansion probably has so much human ash remains in it that it's not even funny. In fact, there's a special code and process for cleaning up the remains of unexpected guests who slip into the park. HEPA cleanup means that an ultrafine or HEPA vacuum cleaner is needed to suck up and remove any remains that a cast member has observed being dumped on the ride. A Disney spokeswoman said that this type of behavior is strictly prohibited and unlawful, and guests who attempt to do so will be escorted off property. And while it's very thoughtful in theory, please don't create a biohazard issue for cleanup crews. They already have too much to deal with on a regular basis. If you're looking for more of a what-if urban legend about the Haunted Mansion, one that's up for speculation claims that during the first preview of the attraction, the house was so scary one guest had a heart attack and passed after the first ride-through, resulting in the original haunt being closed. I'm a little more skeptical on that story because personally I found the ride more comforting than scary, but that's just me. Number 1, made to look. I think it's safe to assume we've all already heard about the alleged phallic artwork on the VHS cover of The Little Mermaid and the SFX mistaken for SEX in the Skyge and the Lion King, yes? I'm pretty sure they've been discussed ad nauseum over the internet at this point. One hidden naughty cameo I had never heard about until today can be found only in the original VHS release of The Rescuers, which is one of the few Disney VHS tapes I didn't own when I was little. Spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't watched the movie before. So as the character of Orville dives to complete his rooftop takeoff, the rescuers pass a topless woman in a window. Since this wasn't in the original run, and only added to the film in post-production, the nude image wasn't discovered until home videos were paused or played in slow motion, which wasn't done as easily on VHS as it is now with the beauty of streaming and digital. Those early home video releases were recalled, and later versions of The Rescuers have been edited to omit the naughty image. You can tell that this was after Walt's passing, since he was known to have a crazy good eye for spotting mistakes in film. One specific story that's known to circulate alleges that a director had seen Walt spot mistakes that no one else could see, even contended that Walt could catch a mistake on a single frame of film as it was run full speed in the projection room. And since a single frame of film is about 1 inch wide and runs at the rate of 24 frames per second, That means that a single frame is only on the screen for about 1/24th of a second. Most folks found it hard to believe that anyone, including Walt Disney, could spot a mistake that was visible for only that, short period of time. They finally decided that the best way to find out whether Walt could perform this incredible feat was to test him. So they had a film editor cut out one tiny frame in a strip of film, and in its place cut in another frame picture of a woman stark nude. When the time of the screening arrived, the group sat nervously, watching Walt as he stared at the screen as the film was shown, not saying a word. And all of a sudden, Walt yelled, "Hold it!" and the film projector stopped. Walt raised his hand, backed the film up a few feet, and then hold it, and sure enough, right there on screen was a single frame of the nude lady. Walt asked what the HE double hockey sticks, a picture of a naked woman, was doing in the middle of a Mickey Mouse cartoon, and the group told Walt the truth, that they wanted to see if he could really spot a mistake on a single frame of running film. Walt looked pleased. He had succeeded in catching the mistake and was proud of his keen eye. Suddenly my love of collecting and watching videos released on VHS so I can enjoy them in their original format sounds a little less eccentric and a lot more justified. I'm not the biggest fan of digital restoration, it always looks a little off to me. Also, I tend to get cranky if a voice performance gets redubbed. Number 5, Walt's frozen head. Alrighty, we're kicking off the day with the elephant in the room, the most popular urban legend that's been used as a pop culture joke for as long as I can remember. According to this long-standing Disney World urban legend, after Walt died of lung cancer at the age of 65 on December 15th of 1966, he was cryogenically preserved and stashed in a secret chamber somewhere at Walt Disney World Resort with hopes of revival in the future, possibly underneath the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Also, it could have been over at Disneyland. Who knows? Walt's health had been deteriorating for many months before he finally agreed to enter St. Joseph Hospital in California on November the 2nd of 1966, where doctors discovered a walnut-sized spot on the x-ray of his left lung and advised immediate surgery. Disney left the hospital to attend the studio business for a couple of days, then re-entered St. Joseph on Sunday, November 6th, for surgery the next day. During Monday morning's operation, doctors found his left lung to be cancerous and removed it. His oversized lymph nodes were an indication that Walt didn't have much longer to go, and after 2 weeks of post-operative care, he was released from the hospital. He crossed the street to his studios and spent another 10 days tending to studio business and visiting relatives before he grew too weak and had to return to St. Joseph's on November 30th. His health started to fail even more rapidly than expected, and drugs and cobalt treatments sapped what little strength he had left. Walt died 2 weeks later when his circulatory system collapsed on the morning of, December 15th. In the decade since Walt's death, the claim that he arranged for his body to be frozen have become, kind of ubiquitous. Was Walt aware of the possibilities of life extension through cryogenics? He certainly could have been, aware of the progress being made in the research. Numerous articles and books on hypothermia and the preservation of animal tissue through freezing appeared in both the scientific, medical, and general press in the late 50s and early 60s. Anyone with an interest in the subject could easily have located this reading material, and even someone without a particular interest in the subject may have run across one or more articles on the topic in the general press. Whatever the possibilities, however, there was no documentary evidence to suggest that Walt was interested in or had even heard of, cryonics. Documentation of Disney's alleged fascination with preserving or extending his life through cryonics didn't appear until decades after his death, and what little information is available has predominantly been provided by some really questionable sources. Despite the persistent rumors, available documentation indicates that Walt was in fact cremated, and he publicly stated 10 years before his death that he didn't want a funeral, but he did want to be cremated, so that checks. His death certificate shows that he was cremated 2 days after he passed. The name, license number, and signature of the embalmer appearing on the certificate are those of a real embalmer who was employed at the Forest Lawn Mortuary at the time. A marked burial plot for Walt Disney and other family members can be found at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, and court papers indicate that the estate paid $40,000 for the interment property. Statements concerning Disney's alleged preoccupation with death are generally attempts to sensationalize the topic by distorting the facts. Although he did worry about dying prematurely, Walt wasn't obsessed with death. Supposedly having been told by a fortune teller that he would die when he was 35, he, kind of brooded about his inevitable demise during occasional bouts of depression, even though he had long passed that, but who hasn't? Contemplating one's mortality isn't an unusual behavior, and there's no evidence that Walt did so to an extensive degree. It is true that his death was not officially announced to the press until several hours after it occurred, on Tuesday, December 15th, but the reasons behind the delay were perfectly ordinary ones, and not so he could be rushed to a chamber. Several family members had to be notified before a public announcement could be made, and Disney studio executives had to be located and informed, that the head of their organization had passed before the information would be released to the press. Part of me will always believe this legend, though. Number 4, the authenticity of Pirates of the Caribbean. Even just uttering those words, I can smell the ride in my memory. I didn't understand the significance of smell, specifically at Walt Disney World, until I took a trip there earlier this year, and that's one of the smells that burned its way into my brain forever. But This isn't about smells, more the ghosty in the bones that might be a little too real. A welder named George was reportedly killed during the construction of Pirates of the Caribbean, which opened in Adventureland in 1973 at Walt Disney World in Florida. Today, George's ghost continues to haunt the immensely popular dark ride attraction at Disney's Magic Kingdom. Not only does George roam aimlessly around the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction, but he will shut the entire ride down if he is not greeted properly by Disney cast members. Although there's no official record of George's living existence, cast members are pretty superstitious when it comes to George. Guests have reported tales of encountering his spirit, with one claiming that while they were on the ride, they saw something out of the corner of their eye in the fire scene. But when they turned to look, nothing was there. And as they were leaving the scene, a cold brush of air went down their back. And when they turned around that time, they saw a floating ball of pure energy. Alrighty, moving on to the bones for the Disneyland version of the attraction. I'm pretty positive the Florida version only houses prop replicas, which is good because that would be way too much for my brain with George already lurking. But the California version of the ride did, in fact, originally feature genuine, real-life skeletal bones. The bones were provided by UCLA Medical Center and placed around various locations throughout the attraction. The morbid incorporation of actual human remains from the Walt Disney Company's perpetual strides towards perfection and authenticity, something I very much love about them. The technology of the day just wasn't up to par in producing realistic enough faux skeletons at the time. Fortunately, that's no longer the case, and apparently, Disney has since replaced the real bones with very realistic fake ones. But there is reportedly at least one skull that is still the real deal. You'll find it in the captain's quarters on the headboard behind the dead man's skeleton in the bed with the magnifying glass and map. Some sources say there are other real bones still present in the addition, so feel free to keep a close eye next time you visit the park. I know I will if I ever visit.
Number 3. Mokele-Mbembe. Up next on our strange list of urban legends from across the world is going to be that of the cryptid Mokele-Mbembe. A cryptid that was totally new to me until this video, so I hope you are finding out about it too at the same time. There are very few things that make me half as happy as finding out about a new cryptid or a new urban legend that I haven't heard about before, because I read a lot of scary stuff every single day. The Mokele-Mbembe is a creature that is said to inhabit the remote regions of the Congo and is said to resemble a large, semi-aquatic creature sort of looking like a sauropod dinosaur. That's long neck if you're a Land Before Time fan. One of the really long ones. You probably heard it called as a brontosaurus. It's actually an apatosaurus, not to be too paleontology nerdy on the channel, but it's important to get that out there. It looks like any other number of long-necked sauropods is what I'm trying to get across. Looks like a big dinosaur. Luckily, the creature is believed to be herbivorous, feeding on plants and aquatic vegetation. Now, according to local legends, the Mokele-Mbembe is said to inhabit the vast network of rivers, swamps, and dense forests of the Congo. Now, this thing's said to be secretive. Like most cryptids out there, there's very few camera-friendly cryptids, and it rarely reveals itself to humans. However, unlike many stories of cryptids or urban legends on this list or not, the Mokele-Mbembe is not hostile. It's not eating people, it's not attacking people. If you find yourself encountering the Mokele-Mbembe, it's said that you are blessed with good luck and spiritual protection. Obviously, you get to meet a dinosaur. That's like the coolest thing ever. Now, in the past, there have been official expeditions hunting for the creature, but it's hard to nail down due to the dense and inhospitable nature of the Congo. Now, much like Top 5 Scary's favorite, the Megalodon, or the Loch Ness Monster, the Mokele-Mbembe is said to be a long since extinct creature that somehow persisted onwards, or a new species that's eluded classification by science. So what is it? Is it really out there? I hope I can see it someday and be blessed with a bit of spiritual protection from my favorite long neck. Number 2, Akamanto. Up next at our number 2 spot, and it's a very fitting spot at number 2, and you'll see why in a minute, is Akamanto, also known as the Red Cloak. It manifests as a masked Japanese spirit and may very well be one of the most evil and downright strange creatures of folklore and urban myth you will ever hear about, I promise. The creature is a humanoid spirit with a long, flowing red cloak that traditionally has a mask that covers its features. It carries a blade or sometimes a scythe of some kind. Now, there's tons of little local variants in how the Akamanto operates, but there are elements that remain consistent across all tales. First and foremost, the Akamanto's modus operandus. The Akamanto preys on you during your most vulnerable moments. This would-be spiritual assassin comes to slay kings on the porcelain throne. It knocks on the smallest room in the house. This demon comes for you while you're on the toilet, if I can be so blue for a moment. That's why it's the number 2 spot. There you go. Little 3rd grade humor for you. Speaking of blue, that leads into the deadly game you're forced to play. The Akamanto then offers you a sinister choice. It asks the occupant a question, choosing between either red toilet paper or blue toilet paper. It's kind of like that guy from Squid Games offering you the paper. Actually, this is a little fun top 5 scary trivia for you. This cryptid is actually what literally inspired that scene in Squid Game. Now, it's a trick question. Neither of these toilet papers that this ghastly spirit has for you are anything like the Royale kittens, okay? The red paper means you will find yourself cut up, leaving behind quite a mess of red. The blue option means you'll be gasping for air, which is clean but slow and painful. This is so funny, but the only way to escape the Akamanto is to tell him that you've got enough toilet paper yourself. And thanks for asking, but you're good. Really, you just have to ignore him, reject his offer, or flush quick and hightail it out of there. You don't play smart with him, you don't ask for purple paper or sandpaper or any wise guy answers, as that's said to lead to the Akamanto dragging you into the underworld, just as long as he doesn't flush you. That's amazing. I love so much that this cryptid, you don't have to do any complicated ritual. You don't have to have some special weapon to fight him. You just have to tell him, no thanks. That's good advice. And number 1, La Llorona. Now, last time you guys made fun of my pronunciation for this, and I would like to inform you that I'm trying to do it better, but I'm almost certainly still doing it wrong. La Llorona, also known as the Weeping Woman, is a haunting legend deeply rooted in Latin American folklore. Perhaps you've heard her story before, on this channel even. She's rather infamous, told and retold, appearing in countless campfire stories, TV, movies. Her tale has captivated generations, scaring us and fascinating us. It's a cautionary tale, warning us of the consequences of disobedience and the dangers of the night. According to the legends, La Llorona was a beautiful woman named Maria who lived in a rural village. She fell in love with a wealthy nobleman and had a family with him. However, the nobleman abandoned her for a younger woman, shattering Maria's heart. Oh, Maria, baby. Nobleman will do that to you. Consumed by grief and anger, Maria drowned her family, except for her husband, in a fit of madness, realizing too late the enormity of her actions. Overwhelmed by guilt and remorse for what she had done, she cast herself into the water and took her own life. But her spirit was denied afterlife, and she was condemned to wander the earth for eternity. She's often described as a spectral figure dressed all in white, her face obscured by either a veil of sorrow or her long, black, wet-soaked hair covering over it. She's said to haunt rivers, lakes, other bodies of water, weeping inconsolably as she searches for her lost family she'll never find. Her cries are bone-chilling, a mournful wail that echoes through the night, and whatever you do, if you hear it, you need to ignore it. You need to avoid it. Do not go bothering her. Legend has it that encountering her is basically a guarantee of misfortune. It's said that she looks out for younger people, mistakes them for her own, and drags them away. Many claim to have seen her and heard her cries in the darkness, but if they try to approach, she vanishes. Number 5. Slender Man. One of the more recent and yet prevalent urban legends is that of Marble Hornets' elongated Slender Man. The enigmatic figure is depicted as a tall, gangly, thin entity dressed in a suit and tie with fractally ever-expanding limbs and a blank, featureless humanoid head. Slender Man first reared that featureless head in internet forums and creepypasta stories, but gained incredible popularity and took a life beyond the internet. The legend of Slender Man states that it lurks in the shadows, often in backwoods and rural areas, and preys upon unsuspecting people. He's said to have an array of supernatural abilities, manipulating people's minds, controlling their actions subconsciously, can teleport, appear, and disappear at will. Slender Man is synonymous with strange disappearances, leaving behind trails of unsettling clues. Slender Man is a genuine phenomenon, transcending the digital realm and seeping into our real-life consciousness and absorbing up our thoughts. I think it's fascinating that in real time we got to watch this thing that started as an internet project turn into a genuine urban legend that will probably be told and retold for future generations. I feel like that's incredible. You see Slender Man in movies, you've seen Slender Man in tons of video games, you've probably seen all kinds of fan art, cosplay, little merchandise. Slender Man has a fandom rivaling most influencers, and is probably one of the most popular cryptids in the world, and also one of the most infamous. Because there is a very dark turn to Slender Man, when in 2014, 2 girls in Wisconsin carried out an attack on their classmate to please the entity, saying that they had been influenced by him, blending the lines between fiction and reality a bit too uncomfortably for most people's takes. A stark reminder to not take anything you hear on the internet too seriously. And if you're looking for way more scary stories of cryptids and urban legends, well, you don't need to go anywhere else on YouTube because you're in the perfect place for it. We've got a video or two on just about anything freaky you can think of. Hit that subscribe button, click that little bell so you don't miss a scream, but would you kindly do that at the end of this video? Because I got 4 more urban legends I am just itching to tell you all about. Number 4, the Gray Man. Coming up next on our list, we're going to take a quick trip to Europe as we head up to Scotland as we talk about the Gray Man. Up in the mist-shrouded peaks of the Cairngorms, they say there's a spirit out there called the Gray Man, watching over the harsh and treacherous terrain. This spectral entity lurks amidst the craggy slopes and swirling mists, described as a towering figure with an indistinct form. His appearance is shrouded in gray mist that seems to blend with the surrounding landscape, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly glow, looking just a bit like my black cat walking in the darkness getting caught by a flashlight. Some say the Gray Man is made up of the mist itself, precipitation given form in the shape of a being mistaken as a man. Many mountaineers and hikers who've braved the slopes of Ben Macdui have reported scary happenings that could be proof of the Gray Man's presence there. Eerily echoing footsteps, an overwhelming sense of dread taking over the pit of your stomach, and some bold expeditioners even claim that they've seen a glimpse of a towering gray humanoid silhouette watching them as they walk over the mountain. The legends warn you that those who are unfortunate enough to cross paths with the Gray Man will bring unimaginable malfeasance to you and your kin. Should you encounter him, you become disoriented, losing your way to the treacherous slopes or being driven to unspeakable madness from the supernatural powers that he has. Above all else though, what is the Gray Man? Where did the legend come from? Is it a malevolent spirit haunting those who cross into its territory? A guardian protecting the mountains? Whatever it might be, just be cautious walking through Ben Macdui. And if we have any Scottish viewers who have a bit of insight into the Gray Man, I found this legend absolutely fascinating and I would love any information you could share with us.
In 3rd place, we have a woman who disappeared for a couple of days. So shamans in Inuit culture speak of 8 physical worlds that exist on the edge of their own reality. And sadly, try as I might, I could not pronounce any of them, and I don't want to butcher them. This tale hails from an unnamed elder who, as a young woman, mistakenly fell into one of these alternate planes for 3 days. At the age of this many, she was playing with her father outside when suddenly the world seemed to shift and change around her, and looked, somehow different, combined in tall grass and a strange dreamlike feeling. And after spending about, 20 to 30 minutes examining and exploring this world, this young girl decided to clamp her teeth on her hand to awaken herself, because I guess pinching herself didn't work. So she bit herself so hard that the redness poured down her hand, creating a scar that exists to this day, but the world she knew slowly shifted back into focus. Upon finding her father searching for her, she found out that the half an hour she experienced was 3 days in our world. I see where Alice in Wonderland got the inspiration. In 2nd place, we have the Phantom driving a dog sled. Now, I know I'm not the only one who thought of the opera when I said Phantom, but no relation here. Formerly known as the Phantom Trapper, a specter cursed to drive a team of 14 pure white huskies across the barren landscapes of winter for all eternity. So visually he appears dressed from head to toe in furs and skin. And legend has it that in life he sold toxic alcohol to the indigenous population and violated many women before meeting his end from natural causes. So since the trapper evaded legal retribution during his life, and he never paid for his acts or asked for forgiveness, and that lack of earthly punishment prompted his unending mission to assist those lost in the snow and guide them to safety. Now, depending on who tells the tale, there's 2 different versions of the legend. The first is that trapping never made this man the kind of money he wanted, so he ended up setting an illegal still up in the tall spruces. This well was a foul but effective alcohol made from pine cones, sugar, and yeast, and he called it Smokes, earning him the nickname of smoker. So the other version of the tale is that he actually brought back very fine, valuable furs whenever he returned from, his hunt, which was kind of fortunate since in this version he was a horrible woman-attacking waste of oxygen. The money he and his skins brought into the town was the only thing that would convince the townspeople to put up with him for a short time. But, eventually his drunken side would become too much and he would wear it as welcome and get kicked out of town until the next time he had a load of furs. Gotta be useful. Now, he still makes and sells smoke in this version, but it's more of like a side quest instead of his main profession. Like I mentioned earlier, in some versions of this, he continued selling smoke even though he was well aware that it was poisonous. Eventually the Mounties found his still, smashed his kegs, and hauled him off to jail for about a year. After being released, he went around begging or stealing every white husky he could in the area, building a new team of dogs, and then made himself a suit exclusively of white animal skins, and after, restarting his distilling business, painted his kegs white as well. Now, decked all in white, he began selling his contraband booze once again, and his new white camouflage outfit made it impossible to track him for long in the snow. So there's like several variations on how Smoker met his end. Some say he harassed the wrong innkeeper's wife and got kaboomed down by her husband, while others say he got lost while out in the wilderness or caught in a vicious storm. Eventually, no matter what, his body was found and buried, but he would not find peace in the grave. Legend tells that even today, the howl of the wind is sometimes joined by the sound of a dog team running through the night. Some hear them passing by in the snow, while others have heard their traces slapping outside the outside of their cabin. Occasionally, a person might catch a glimpse of an all-white dog team being driven by a figure in white furs, but they never leave tracks in the snow or stop on their eternal run. And in first place, we have Sedna. So Sedna is the goddess of the sea and marine animals in Inuit mythology, also known as the Mother of the Sea or Mistress of the Sea. She has a bundle of other names, but once again, while I tried learning how to pronounce them for today, I would have butchered them beyond belief, and I don't want to disrespect this tale in any way, especially not like that. So the story of Sedna, which is a creation myth, describes how she came to rule over Adlivun, the Inuit underworld. Similar to the last legend on our list, more than one version of the Sedna legend exists. Some legends have her as the daughter of a goddess, while others only mention her father. In one legend, Sedna is a giant, the daughter of the creator god Anguta, with a great hunger that causes her to attack her parents. Angered, Anguta takes her out to sea and throws her over the side of his kayak. As she clings to the sides, he chops off her fingers and she sinks to the underworld, becoming the ruler of the monsters of the deep. Her huge fingers become the seals, walruses, and whales hunted by the Inuit people. In another version of the legend, she is dissatisfied with men found for her by her father and decides to marry a dog. And her father is so angry at this that he throws her into the sea, and when she tries to climb back into the boat, he cuts off her fingers. Her fingers become the first seals and she becomes a mighty sea goddess. When she is angered, the shaman travels to wash and comb her hair for her, after which she is placated and releases the animals to the hunters. In other versions, she is unable to comb her hair because she lacks fingers, so once again, a shaman must brush it for her. In the Netsilik region, the story states that Nuliayuk was a mistreated orphan. One day the people tried to get rid of her by, attempting to drown her by chopping off her fingertips, which transformed into seals and walruses. Eventually, she marries a sculpin and lives in the sea, controlling all sea mammals. Other versions of the legend depict Sedna as a beautiful maiden who rejects marriage proposals from the hunters of her village. And when an unknown hunter appears, her father agrees to give her to him as a wife in return for fish. Sedna's father gives her a sleeping potion and gives her to the hunter, who takes her to a large nest on a cliff, revealing his true form, a giant bird spirit. Her father attempts to rescue her when he realizes the truth, but the bird spirit becomes angry, causing a great storm, and her father panics and throws her into the raging sea. Attempting to cling to the kayak, her hands freeze and her fingers fall off, becoming the creatures of the sea. She falls to the bottom of the sea and grows a fishtail. Sedna is kidnapped or deceived by a different bird creature in yet another version. Her father then leaves in his kayak to rescue her from the floating ice island where she is imprisoned while the bird creature is away, but he gets kinda ticked off by her disappearance and calls to a spirit of the sea to help him, and said spirit locates the kayak with the two humans aboard and creates huge waves to kill them. Her father throws her overboard, to try and appease the angry god, and once again, she clings to the kayak, but her father grabs a little axe and chops 3 of her fingers off before striking her on the head, and they each become a different species of seal. The stroke to her head sends Sedna to the ocean floor, where she resides, commanding the animals of the sea. In one Baffin Island tradition, she was in a kayak with her family when a storm started, and her parents thought, she was to blame, so they threw her into the sea. How'd you know? She clung to the kayak, but we cut the fingers off. The tips, then the knuckle, then the other knuckle. Her disembodied fingers turned into sea creatures and she had control over them. Between all the versions, we can see how the origins of how, seals, walruses, and whales came to be. If humans angered her, she could stop the animals from coming to their hunting sites, thus causing famine. She is generally considered a vengeful goddess, and hunters must placate and pray to her to release the sea animals from the ocean depths for their hunt. Some folks have thrown worn-out harpoon heads, broken stabby elements, and morsels of meat and bone into the sea as offerings. Do I kind of feel like a broken record after all of that? Sure, but I wanted to make sure I covered as many variations of the legend as I could to be respectful. Also, I kind of fear this goddess now, and I didn't want to risk offending her or her leagues of creatures in any form. In 5th place, we have the Qualupalik. They're a creature that lives along the Arctic shorelines near ice flows and are said to steal younglings that wander too close to the water. So this myth is believed to serve the purpose of protecting younglings from a dangerous environment, keeping them from wandering too close to the ice. So let's start this off with how they appear, shall we? Also known as the Qualupiluit, it is often described as having green, slimy skin, long hair, and long fingernails. Their hands are webbed like an aquatic creature, along with scales and fins, and they tend to wear an amotik, which I believe is an Inuit parka mostly worn by women. Some versions of the legend say that their parkas are made of eider duck feathers and are used to carry kidnapped younglings. It is said to have 2 flippers, and one is able to emit a shrill sound that paralyzes its victims. They also have the ability to alter their appearance through a technique known as Pilutitaminik. I tried. While some interpretations include the pronoun he, this creature is predominantly described in a feminine manner. Now, speaking of her looks, it is believed that she uses the abducted to maintain her long, flowing hair. Well then, add that to the latest trends of growing hair. Look, I've talked about weird beauty secrets from history before, and people will truly try anything to keep their hair long and their skin clear. Accounts vary as to, what actually happens to those who are taken. Some say the victim is, simply devoured, while others say that they are held in a stasis-like state to fuel the youth. You know what, I think I'd prefer to be devoured instantly and get it over with, but let me know in the comments what you'd prefer. Moving on, I suppose. One strategy they use for hunting is to emit an ethereal hum that will draw victims closer to the water so they can be pulled in. But, don't worry, they can be defeated. They're not some ethereal being without any kind of vulnerabilities. This creature can be outsmarted by its targets, so clever hunters would call out to it and ask it to change shape for them, usually into something like a seal or a whale, so they could, kill it and bring home a valuable catch. Oh, but our tale is not over yet. Please, have we met? Is anything ever that simple? There are tales of younglings willingly being given to this creature as a sacrifice. One such tale is about a grandmother and her grandson who were struggling without food, so the grandmother called upon this creature to come and take him away, as she was not able to feed him and he would be, better off. So once the tribe was able to successfully hunt again, a young couple took it upon themselves to retrieve the lost boy and were able to track him down, tethered to a piece of seaweed by this creature so he could not escape her. However, they were not able to retrieve him because she would drag him back under the waves whenever the would-be want-to helpers got too close. They stealthily hid nearby all night long though, and cut him loose once the sun rose. So this tale has different variations. Some version have the grandmother giving the child to the creature as a punishment, or this child became a greater hunter after being rescued. Long story short, don't play close to the edge of the water alone, or that might be the end of you. Honestly, even as an adult, that's still something I want to observe. No drowning for me, thanks. In 4th place, we have a ghost ship. So the cargo ship Octavius met its demise in 1761 after leaving China and setting sail for Britain via the Northwest Passage. So at that time, no ship had ever successfully navigated the Northwest Passage, and the Octavius disappeared, so it's no exception to that rule. A whaling ship discovered the damaged remains of Octavius on October 11th of 1775 and boarded it to look for, survivors and cargo. When the men ventured into the below deck quarters, they found the ship's captain frozen at his desk, partway through filling out the ship's log, and the rest of the crew were similarly encased in ice throughout their rooms. The whalers snatched up the ship log and fled the Octavius, leaving behind everything, including the first and last entries, which were stuck to the captain's frozen desk. The log revealed that the Arctic temperatures and ice captured the Octavius about 250 miles from Barrow, where all those aboard perished on November 11th of 1762. But the whalers, however, found the boat near Greenland, which meant it somehow made its way through the Northwest Passage, even with its crew frozen solid. Now look, while Frozen might not be my favorite Disney movie ever, did anyone check in with Elsa or any of her ancestors? This just seems like a magical accident that could easily be undone. Number 3, hire a hitman. Alrighty, so this is where things get a little more into the legend part of today's video. One of the greatest myths about the dark web is that you can hire an assassin, with some folks saying that that kind of service costs as little as, $5 grand. Just a couple of months of rent. We all have that kind of money lying around, right? in this economy? Here's the thing, officially speaking, technically no dark web search records were ever found of an actual hit attempt or assassin operating there. Now, I'm not saying it's never happened, since I don't exactly have the time or expertise to go deep diving for a week, to try to find a legitimate person selling those types of services, but what was found by experts? So a network of dark web websites and individuals who accepted Bitcoin in exchange for absolutely nothing at all. I get using Bitcoin for secrecy and all, but trust me when I say you'll never catch me using it as a form of payment. If I ever start talking about cryptocurrency on social media, assume I've been hacked or kidnapped. Scammers out there are relying on the veil of mystery that the dark web has provided. Whereas in reality, more injuries and killings happen through Craigslist and similar websites that are widely available on the surface web. It took me a moment to research that one, but yep, people have actually hired hitmen off of Craigslist for crimes. Granted, it never seems to end like they want it, so I wouldn't really recommend it. Also, leaving a digital trail is always a mistake if you want to do something naughty. No, I'm not speaking from experience, just common sense. Number 2, Silk Road. Silk Road was an online black market and the first modern darknet market that was launched back in 2011 by its American founder, Ross Ulbricht, under the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts. Hey look, I love a good reference to The Princess Bride, so that got me. The name Silk Road comes from a historical network of trade routes that were started during the Han Dynasty between Europe, India, China, and many other countries on the Afro-Eurasian landmass. 2 other individuals were also closely involved in the site's growth and success, known as Variety Jones and Smedley. In June of 2011, Gawker published an article about the site, which led to an increase in notoriety and website traffic. As part of the dark web, Silk Road operated as a hidden service on the Tor network, allowing users to buy and sell products and services between each other anonymously. To give you an idea of just how widespread it was, a former FBI special agent called it the Amazon of illicit substance sites. According to reliable sources, on Silk Road, you could buy no substances, illegal services, like hacking into private accounts, pirated content, fake passports, and more. All transactions were conducted with Bitcoin, which I guess it does help with protecting user identities, but yeesh. The website was known for its illegal substance marketplace, among other illegal and legal product listings. Between February of 2011 and July of 2013, the site facilitated sales amounting to around 9 million bitcoins. In May of 2013, Silk Road was taken down for a short period of time by a sustained DDoS attack. On June 23rd of 2013, it was first reported that the DEA seized 11.02 bitcoins, then worth a total of $814, which the media suspected was a result of a Silk Road honeypot sting. The FBI has claimed that the real IP address of the Silk Road server was found via data leaked directly from the site's CAPTCHA and was located in Iceland. IT security experts have doubted the FBI's claims because technical evidence suggests that no misconfiguration that could cause a specific leak was present at the time, but in October of 2013, the FBI shut down Silk Road and arrested Ross. Silk Road 2.0 came online the next month, run by former site administrators, but was shut down the following year as a part of Operation Onimus. Number 1, Mariana's Web. Already, not to be confused with Matt Webb, the fantastic guitarist from Mariana's Trench, one of my favorite bands, because goodness knows that could be an easy mistake. The legend of Mariana's Web appears to get its name from the deepest part of the ocean though, Mariana's Trench. It's apparently the deepest part of the dark web, a forbidden place of mysterious evil. Maybe. Depending on where you get your Mariana's Web myths, it's where you'll find the darkest secrets humanity has in its history. The secret location of Atlantis and the Vatican secret archives, or a database of archives belonging to the most powerful intelligence agencies on Earth. Now, if any of those titles sound familiar, I would recommend checking out some of the other content we put out here, since that's the type of stuff I like to talk about. But here's the thing. Mariana's Web is the definition of spooky BS, especially because it's technically impossible. It's supposedly only accessible through quantum computers, which really only exist in science fiction. This is once again where the legend part of today's title comes into play. But let me know in the comments if you think it exists, since honestly I wish it would. It would make my life a heck of a lot easier if I could hack into the Vatican archives and get the answers we all deserve. Number 5, Red Rooms. I'm just gonna start this off by getting the obvious out of the way. This has nothing to do with the 50 Shades trilogy, so don't bother asking about that icky series that barely knows the truth about anything schmexy. Among the many illicit activities that take place on the dark web, one of the most disturbing is the existence of red rooms. So these rooms have gained a lot of attention and infamy, with many rumors and myths circulating about their existence and operation. While some people believe that red rooms are nothing more than urban legends, others claim to have witnessed them firsthand. So in fact, on Reddit, 4chan, and Hidden Wiki, a kind of, Cliff Notes for dark web beginners, you can find people trading second and third and fourth hand accounts of red rooms that have opened and closed. The concept of red rooms first apparently appeared on the dark web sometime in in the early 2010s, and their name derives from the color of the room where the supposed acts take place. The term Red Room gained popularity after a Japanese animation featured a pop-up ad asking, "Do you like the Red Room?" And if users attempted to close the ad, a full-sized window would open with the names of individuals who had supposedly accessed the Red Room before and were found dead. The idea is that viewers pay to watch a live stream of a person being tormented and eventually killed, and they can even interact with the tormentor and other viewers through chat or messaging functions. Payments for these services are made in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin to ensure, anonymity. Despite the attention that Red Rooms have received, it's kind of challenging to determine whether they actually exist or not. But here's the thing, accessing them is not as difficult as one might expect. A simple Google search for redroom.onion, that link can yield results for these supposedly hidden pages. In addition, the technical limitations of the dark web make it almost impossible to stream live video, and payment analyses suggest that there are very few people actually paying for these services. Some people claim to have accessed them and seen the gruesome acts taking place, while others insist that they are nothing more than hoaxes designed to scare people. There have been no verified cases of people being killed in real time on the dark web, and many experts believe that the concept of Red Rooms is more of a fantasy than a reality. One reason why it's so challenging to verify the existence of these Red Rooms is because the dark web is notoriously difficult to navigate and monitor. It's impossible to search for specific websites on the dark web using traditional search engines like Google or Bing, and accessing dark web sites requires specialized software like Tor or I2P. Furthermore, many dark websites use encryption and other security measures to protect their users' identities and activities, making it pretty challenging to track or trace them. However, there have been some instances where law enforcement agencies have claimed to have shut down Red Rooms or arrested their operators. In 2015, the FBI arrested a man named Peter Scully in the Philippines who was accused of running a Red Room called Daisy's Destruction. The site was said to feature videos of Scully harming young people, and it was allegedly one of the most extreme examples of a Red Room ever discovered. Scully was eventually convinced of multiple crimes, including, young people sexual harm, human selling, and killing. Internet users continue to seek out the elusive and horrifying Red Rooms on sites like Reddit and 4chan, despite many claims that, it's nothing more than an urban legend. But let me know your take in the comments. Honestly, I believe they're out there, but I've also watched way too many crime shows for my own good. Number 4. What's for sale? I have wandered many an oddities market in my time, and heck, I've even performed an act at one that would make most people flinch. I've seen folks selling real and fake bones, demonic dolls, niche, schmexy fine leather goods, vintage clothes, tarot readings, banned books, World War II memorabilia, and oddities I can't even begin to describe. And heck, that's just the stuff like I can remember off the top of my head. So, what does the dark web have that I can't find in a niche marketplace? Oh, the no-no pills and powders. Sadly, I don't think I'm allowed to say the D word on here, so pardon me if things take a turn for the Looney Tunes way of speaking for safety's sake. I found plenty of tales on the interwebs about the crafty ways folks have been mailed their purchases. User OiRaves on Reddit is adamant that while he personally never received anything from any deep web affiliated sales folk, he did live with a roommate who would constantly receive the strangest brochures. At first, they would receive stuff for like cruise lines, which he wrote off as junk mail, but they came so frequently and started getting stranger, making him suspicious. For folks like me who might be wondering how pamphlets can get strange, apparently the mail ranged from, Christian Mingle brochures to petting zoo brochures, pretty much, any kind of pamphlet for any and all services one could think of. At the time, our narrator kind of felt like someone was gaslighting him, but he never said anything, and the brochures would disappear as quickly as they came, so he didn't really have time to stress it. That is until one fateful day when he walked into his apartment and his roommate was delicately cutting into a brochure to mull out a small baggie of powder. All I'm gonna say is that it definitely wasn't flour or icing sugar. Now, one time our narrator almost threw out a regular sized business envelope since after he opened it up, it looked similar to regular silly junk mail, until he noticed that the envelope had a hidden flap on the inside where there was, no things. Other transportation or delivery methods known to the dark webs include using a comic book that's still in the plastic sealing, but the entire back page directly inside the cover was a sheet of acid, or a CD in a case, once again, with the plastic sealed, and it looked totally ordinary until you peeled back the case artwork. In terms of how some folks get away with powders, pills, and other stuff, apparently the trick is to use collectible Pez dispensers already filled with pills that look like, yep, they've never been opened. Funny story actually about white powder. One time I was doing a virtual script reading of the incredible movie Ready or Not, and had to mime using powder of my own, and I actually wound up inhaling way too much icing sugar up my nose, and oh my god, did it ever burn. Thankfully, I was off screen after it for a while, so I was able to recover in private, but it will be a permanent memory for the rest of my life. Number 3, location. So sure, yeah, everybody today knows that Area 51 is the common name of this, highly classified United States Air Force facility within the Nevada Test and Training Range. As a remote detachment administered by the Edwards Air Force Base, the facility is officially called Homey Airport or Groom Lake, depending on who you ask. It's just home to all things unknown. lots of aliens, lots of folks like myself who believe in, aliens and UFOs. We're all pretty sure that that's where all the flying discs and more tend to be housed. We all know this. It's commonly thought to support the development and testing of experimental aircraft and weapons systems. The CIA only publicly acknowledged the base's existence in 2013, June 25th to be exact, following a Freedom of Information Act request filed in 2005 and declassified documents detailing its history and purpose. So who do we have to thank for all this? Bob Lazar. Earlier when I mentioned that 1989 interview, when he was under the pseudonym of Dennis and he had his face hidden? Well, that's when he talked about his employment at S4, which is a subsidiary facility he had claimed, exists near Area 51. Once again, folks, back in 1989, Area 51 wasn't like the common knowledge it was today. It was like, oh, middle of the desert, cool, there's dust there. It's like, no, there's aliens there. So back in 1989 was when he claimed that the facility was adjacent to the Papoose Lake, which is located south of the main Area 51 facility at Groom Lake. He claimed the site consisted of concealed aircraft hangars built into a mountainside. He's mentioned that, he was walking down the hallway once, briefly glanced through a door that he wasn't supposed to, and saw what he interpreted as two men in lab coats facing down and talking to something small with long arms. Now he's not sure if he saw an alien at that time, might have just been like a doll as reference, but still, Area 51, that's where they house all the material recovered at Roswell. That's where they study all of the occupants, where we manufacture aircrafts based on alien technology. Oh, and it might also be a place to host meetings or joint undertakings with extraterrestrials. It also tends to be where the development of exotic energy weapons for the Strategic Defense Initiative or, other weapons programs happens, and possibly where they're working on projects to do with weather control, time travel, teleportation, and exotic propulsion systems related to the Aurora program, which that's a whole other freaking can of worms. Many of these tend to do with the underground facilities at Groom or Papoose Lake. The S4 location that Bob talked about. Technically, it's 8.5 miles south and includes, claims of a transcontinental underground railroad system and a disappearing airstrip named the Cheshire Strip, after, the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. Because the strip briefly appears when water is sprayed onto it, it's camouflaged asphalt. And, this is all engineering based on alien technology. Number 2, the Dreamland documentary. So in this 1996 documentary, directed by Bruce Burgess, it included an interview with a 71-year-old mechanical engineer who claimed to be a former employee at Area 51 during the 1950s. His claims included that he worked on a flying disc simulator, which had been based on a disc originating from a crashed extraterrestrial craft and was used to train pilots. He also claimed to have worked with an extraterrestrial named J-Rod, and he described J-Rod as a telepathic translator. Number 1, contact with aliens. So, once again, we're back to Bob Lazar. So he claimed that during, his time with the program, he read briefing documents describing the historical involvement of Earth the past 10,000 years with extraterrestrial beings described as gray aliens. He read briefing documents describing the historical involvement of the Earth for the past 10,000 years with extraterrestrial beings described as gray aliens from a planet orbiting the twin binary star system, Zeta Reticuli. So as of September of 2019, no extrasolar planets have been found in that star system, according to the government, but we all know they can lie to us about that. So if you don't know, what the heck is Zeta Reticuli? So it's a binary star system in the southern constellation of Reticulum. From the southern hemisphere, the pair can be seen with the naked eye as a double star in the very dark skies, but based upon parallax measurements, the system is located at a distance of about 39.3 light years from Earth. Now both stars are solar analogs that have characteristics similar to those of the Sun, and they belong to the Zeta Herculis moving group of stars that share a common origin. So you might be asking, okay Alexa, what does this have to do with aliens? Yeah, we all know Skinny Bob? Yeah. Number 5, reverse engineering. So in the 1989 interview Bob Lazar did, he said he worked at a secret facility that, don't worry, I'll talk more about it later, where alien technology was being reverse engineered. Meaning, taken apart to figure out how it worked and whether the Pentagon could duplicate it. Hey, the premise seems less absurd now. It was the 80s. We didn't know a whole lot. Bob said that his job was to help with the reverse engineering of one of 9 flying saucers, which he alleged were extraterrestrial in origin. He claims that one of the flying saucers, the one he coined the Sport model, was manufactured out of a metallic substance similar in appearance and touch to liquid titanium. Bob said that the propulsion of the studied vehicle ran on an antimatter reactor and was fueled by the chemical element with atomic number 115. Yes, don't worry. We all know about atomic number 15, not exactly the super stable thing, and nobody's been able to recreate it. In a subsequent interview that November, Bob appeared unmasked and under his own name. So that's when we found out, it's like, oh, hey, that guy. Where he claimed that his job interview for work at the facility was with the contractor EG&G, and that his official employer was the United States Navy. Bob said that the craft he was working on was, dismantled, and the reactor he studied was topped by a sphere or semisphere, which emitted a force field capable of repulsing human flesh. Ow. He further explained though that the craft was split into 2 main levels, so the reactor was positioned at the center of the upper level, with an antenna extending to the top, surrounded by 3 gravity amplifiers. Now these were connected to gravity emitters on the lower level, which can rotate 180 degrees to output a gravity beam or anti-gravity wave. In 1989, Bob said that the seats of the saucer he saw were approximately tiny human-sized, and that he had even seen alien cadavers of a corresponding size. He's mentioned that the main craft he worked on would aim its belly to the target and then bring all of the amplifiers to power, and then fly off in that direction, with the belly or the bottom forward. If that description of a spacecraft tilting sounds familiar, I'm assuming you're familiar with the gimbal UFO? So the Pentagon released a video back in 2017 where naval pilots encountered a fleet of the unknown craft off of the coast of Florida, which was in 2015, and have since had dozens of similar encounters. So in said gimbal video, there's a mechanistic turn against the wind without deceleration, which, not to get all science speak, it means that a craft without rotors, no heat signatures, no plumes, no tail fins, no nothing, and also certainly no tail number, moves in a way that is counterintuitive to aeronautics. Look at me using science words. So when Bob saw it, he said it had to be a gravity-propelled craft which mimics the propulsion system that he described. Okay, if that's not enough for you, let's think about another famous UFO incident. What's one I've talked about a million times? Oh right, the Tic Tac. This is more in 2004. Now the Navy pilot who engaged the Tic Tac, Black Aces commander Dave Fravor, says he doesn't believe the astonishing craft was made on Earth, and that the propulsion might be, and is probably, anti-gravity. So somebody showed the video to Bob, and he was like, right away, sport mode. The craft stashed in the desert. He said it's the exact same propulsion system. Now let's bring in former Pentagon intelligence officer Lou Elizondo, who's in charge of, the secret Pentagon study, E.T. So he told some folks that one goal of the project was to determine the physics of UFOs, how they can achieve the seemingly impossible, impossible to our little human noggins. The military came to believe the craft relied on special metamaterials, stuff that can't be made with known technology. So gee, where have we heard that before? Oh right! Bob already made those claims and was ridiculed. So what do you know, the Pentagon's now on the same page? Bob said it first. Number 4, UFO Recovery Program. So, let's move on to a different whistleblower, David Charles Grush. He's a veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, or NGA, the NRO. I'm not going to say the full name because every time I say that specific word, somebody corrects my pronunciation. That's where he served as a representative to the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force from 2019 to 2021. Now from late 2021 to July of 2022, he was the NGA co-lead for UAP analysis and its representative to the task force led by the Department of the Navy, under the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. At the NGO, David served as a Senior Intelligence Capabilities Integration Officer, cleared at the top secret compartmented information level. So from 2016 to 2021, he served with the NRO as Senior Intelligence Officer and led the production of the Director's Daily Briefing. He was a GS-15 civilian, so the military equivalent of a colonel, and has numerous awards and decorations for his participation in covert and, secret operations to advance American security. Long story short, all that gobbledygook means the guy's credible. Now he said the recoveries of partial fragments through and up to intact vehicles have been made for decades, through to the present day, by the government, its allies, and defense contractors. He said that the craft recovery operations are ongoing at various levels of activity, and that individuals on these UAP programs have approached him in his official capacity and disclosed their concerns regarding a multitude of wrongdoings, such as illegal contracting against the federal acquisitions regulations and other criminality and the suppression of information across a qualified industrial base in academia. Now, associates who vouched for David said his information was highly sensitive, providing evidence that materials from objects of non-human origin are in the possession of highly secret, programs. Wow. Multiple government witnesses. You don't say. So even though locations, program names, and other specifics remain classified, the Inspector General and Intelligence Committee staff were provided with all the details. So don't worry. The people who need the information need it. We just don't have it yet. Analysis has determined that the objects retrieved are of non-human origin based on the vehicle morphologies, and material science testing and the possession of unique atomic arrangements and radiological signatures. Now the investigation was centered on extensive interviews with high-level intelligence officials, some of whom are directly involved with the program. And what do you know? They corroborated his information. David is pretty certain that the information he knows has been illegally withheld from Congress to intentionally thwart legitimate congressional oversight of the UAP program. He's also filed a complaint alleging that he suffered illegal retaliation for his confidential disclosures. In his statements, David claims that UFO legacy programs have long been concealed within multiple agencies, nesting UAP activities in conventional secret access programs without appropriate reporting to various oversight authorities. According to the unclassified complaint, in July of 2021, he had confidentially provided classified information to the Department of Defense Surveillance Inspector General concerning the withholding of UAP-related information from Congress. Now, Christopher Mellon, who spent nearly 20 years in the U.S. intelligence community and served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, has worked with Congress for years on unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, he's mentioned that a number of well-placed current and former officials have shared detailed information with them, including, no big, just the location where a craft was abandoned and recovered. He claims the reason more folks haven't come forward is due to a lack of trust in the leadership of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, established by Congress. The assumption that the United States alone has bullied the other nations into maintaining this secrecy for nearly a century? Yeah, I kind of believe it. What about you? Number 3, the chronovisor. No, this isn't some kind of weird hat or goggles. Italian Benedictine monk Pellegrino Ernetti claimed to have used a time viewer which could film the past without sound, and used it to obtain a photograph of the crucifixion of Jesus and view scenes from ancient Rome, including a performance of the lost play Thyestes. Or is it Thyestes? Let me know in the comments. Now, this was mostly scrubbed away in history until 2002, when author Father François Brune swore in his book, Le Nouveau Mystère du Vatican, that the chronovisor not only exists, but that he learned about it in the early 1960s. A day after he met scientist priest Father Pellegrino for the first time, the two were sailing along the Grand Canal of Venice, discussing, biblical interpretations, when Ernetti explained that theories and interpretations were unnecessary, when you could just see the truth for yourself. Which, I wish! It would make so much more sense in life. He explained to Brune how the chronovisor functioned, allowing the viewer to both see and hear events of the past and future. And hey, if you don't believe my word, his full account is included in Brune's book. With a little digging, researchers will find first mentions of the chronovisor in a 1972 article published in the Italian magazine La Domenica del Corriere, entitled "A Machine That Photographs the Past Has Finally Been Invented." Belonging to the Vatican, the chronovisor time machine is heralded as one of the papacy's best-kept or worst-kept secrets. The device is said to be replete with 3 precious alloys, cathodes, dials, levers, and that it has the ability, once again, to display a myriad of historic events in biblical and Roman history. Acting as a sort of television, the chronovisor has even supposedly verified the existence of Jesus Christ and, once again, broadcast that crucifixion. Ouch! The chronovisor time machine is claimed to have been invented in the 1950s by a dedicated and secret team of Italian scientists, including physicist Enrico Fermi and, our favorite, Ernetti. Critics may take credibility issues with the fact that Ernetti eventually became a priest, but this critic doesn't take issue with that. More so that the Vatican is hiding a tool that could be used to help solve unanswered crimes around the world and help people. Imagine how many killings could be solved, and how many families of lost people could have answers. And just, I think it'd be pretty cool to look back through history and just be like, oh, so that's what actually happened, instead of the fan fiction we often read in our textbooks. Number 2, Project Rainbow. The legend of the Philadelphia experiment, a story that has permeated paranormal lore for decades, is a fascinating tale of alleged military experimentation in science fiction-like events that unfolded around the USS Eldridge at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in 1943. This narrative has captured the fascination of many, myself included. The story first emerged in the late 1950s when an ex-merchant mariner named Carl M. Allen sent a book filled with handwritten annotations to the U.S. Office of Naval Research. The annotations appeared to detail a heated debate among multiple individuals about Morris K. Jessup's book on unidentified flying objects, and they touched upon alien races and propulsion for flying saucers. A mysterious figure named Jemmy was at the center of this discourse. Using the name Carlos Miguel Allende, introduced the concept of a dangerous experiment allegedly conducted by the U.S. Navy in 1943. This experiment involved rendering the USS Eldridge invisible and teleporting it from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia. Allen claimed to have witnessed this event while serving on another ship. The story took an even stranger turn, though, when 2 officers at the Office of Naval Research took an interest in the matter. They showed Jessup the annotated book and noticed similarities in the handwriting between the annotations and the letters they received from Allen. Over the years, this tale gained popularity through various iterations in books and films. Most notably, Charles Berlitz's and William L. Moore's book, The Philadelphia Experiment, Project Invisibility, and the subsequent 1984 time travel film titled The Philadelphia Experiment. Some individuals even claim to have been aboard the USS Eldridge during the alleged experiment, further blurring the lines between fact and fiction. And despite the enduring allure of the experiment, it kind of remains a contentious story. The US Navy has consistently denied its existence, go figure, stating that the experiment contradicts well-established facts about the USS Eldridge and is rooted in non-existent physics. I think we all know at this point to take any government statements with a pound of salt. Many aspects of the story, such as the supposed side effects on the crew, the teleportation, and the invisibility, they might lack concrete evidence, but they've got quite a few anecdotal accounts and pretty valid information. Ultimately, the truth behind this legend remains elusive, nestled in the shadowy realms of speculation and intrigue, but I believe it, Number 1. Die Glock. So since this device happens to be from World War II, I apologize in advance for how nonsensical I might sound, since the interwebs don't really like the name of the evil dictator at the time or his Yahtzee followers, if you get my drift. In his 2001 book, The Hunt for Zero Point, author Nick Cook identified claims about Die Glock as having originated in the 2000 Polish book, The Truth About the Wonder Weapon by Igor Witkowski. Nick described Igor's claims of a device called the Bell, engineered by Yahtzee scientists, that was a glowing, rotating contraption rumored to have some sort of anti-gravitational effect and be a time machine. According to Nick, Die Glock was bell-shaped, about 12 feet high and 9 feet in diameter, and incorporated 2 high-speed, counter-rotating cylinders filled with a purplish, liquid, metallic-looking substance that was supposed to be highly radioactive, with the code name Zerum 525. He recounts claims that scientists and technicians who worked on the Bell and who did not die of its effects or, disappeared mysteriously were wiped out by the SS at the close of the war, and the device was moved to an unknown location. Which, honestly, those all check. Nick proposed that SS official Hans Kammler later secretly traded this technology to the US military in exchange for his freedom. Historical theorists are pretty sure that a concrete ring called the Henge near the Wenceslas mine that was built in 1943 and vaguely resembled Stonehenge was used as a launch pad for the Bell. Igor's book was translated to English in 2003, and he claimed to have discovered evidence of Die Glock in a review of World War II-era documents that were declassified by the Polish government, which led him to additional research via archives and interviews. The first document, allegedly supplied to Igor by an unnamed Polish government official, was from the war crimes trial for General Jacob Sporenberg, who supposedly confessed to ordering the deaths of around 60 people who had knowledge of the secretive project. Kurt de Bus, Werner von Braun, and Walter Gerlach were also allegedly implicated in the Die Glock research. Igor claims this device was organized under a division of the Waffen-SS and operated mainly at facilities in Lower Silesia. Die Glock was conceived in early 1942, and active experimentation began in mid-1944. Prisoners from the Gross Rosen concentration camp were exposed to radiation from this machine, resulting in many deaths and health problems. Survivors of the camp reported witnessing tests of this machine, reporting a bright bluish light from the object. Igor believes Zerum 525 was likely an irradiated form of mercury used in the creation of a form of plasma that was intended as a weapon and/or propulsion system, and which would have been capable of distorting space and time. So what you're telling me is there is indeed a time-traveling device out there. I just need to find it. Game on. Number 5, Victor Goddard. Now, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times, but I place a lot of belief and trust in experiences that come from pilots, since they are legitimately trained to recognize the unknown in the air and remember everything about what they see. Hey, my ADHD brain can never ever remember that much unless it's a hyperfixation, and even then, I wouldn't trust it to remember anything on command when I'm overwhelmed. Back in 1935, when he was a wing commander, Sir Victor Goddard was instructed to inspect an inactive airbase located in Drem near Edinburgh in Scotland. While flying over it, Sir Goddard found the airbase to be in a poor state, with cattle grazing on the wild grass that had now forced its way through the tarmac. Like, I swear the entire place was in complete shambles. Later on, while flying his plane though, he got into a bit of trouble thanks to the harsh weather conditions, and to avoid an accident, Sir Goddard decided to fly back to the abandoned airbase till the weather cleared out a little bit. As he approached the airbase, the torrential rain oddly and very abruptly gave way to bright sunshine when Sir Victor noticed that the airbase was not only in mint condition, but in use. He spotted mechanics wearing blue overalls working on the yellow planes parked on the runway, but he was unable to recognize a single craft on the base. There was no way the place could have gone from decrepit to fully renovated and operational in half an afternoon, and more importantly, these guys weren't wearing the khaki-colored uniforms that were a norm at the time. Oh, and by the way, the Air Force at the time painted all their planes in silver. Not yellow. Completely baffled by what on earth was going on, Sir Goddard got the shock of his life 4 years later. So Europe was war-torn, and he happened to visit Drem again. But this time he saw everything he saw 4 years back in 1935. The same people in blue overalls servicing yellow planes, and he even found the plane he couldn't recognize before, now identifying it as a Miles Magister. I've had like a glimpse into the future before myself, but never a slip that detailed. Honestly, out of the entire list that I've curated for y'all today, this is one instance where history was actually able to prove it. So, time slip confirmed. Number 4, the Mandela Effect. Okay, think about this one. Really think about it. The Mandela Effect is a phenomenon where a large group of people remember something differently from how it occurred in reality. It is named after Nelson Mandela, as some incorrectly remembered him dying in prison in the 1980s. Now, while some people say the Mandela Effect is just due to confirmation bias or misremembering, others entertain more speculative explanations, such as, Parallel universes, or in my beliefs, time slips, time travel? Hey, what's the first rule of time travel? Never touch anything because it could impact the future and spiral. So what if the Mandela Effect is just leftovers from people traveling back in time and messing with the past? Ergo, affecting the present timeline. Let's start with the most famous example. Even though, Nelson Mandela didn't pass away until 2013, many people remember him dying in the 80s while in prison. And some folks even remember his widow giving a speech after his death, vividly. So what if somebody went back in time and saved him from passing? Ergo, changing the timeline. Okay, look, if you don't believe the big thing, just look at the amount of small things that have changed over the years. Berenstain Bears, which is one I remember having totally different spelling, the Monopoly Man having a monocle, the creator of Peanuts having a T in his last name, that one boggled my mind. Fruit of the Loom having a cornucopia in their logo, which looks much better. Luke, I am your father. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Like, trust me, I could be here for ages listing all the obvious examples off. It makes sense to me. The times just sort of slipped and warped and changed. Number 3, poisoned candy and or razor blades. A Halloween classic. So one Halloween, a boy and his friends decided they wanted a bigger candy haul than the year before. And after they had gone to every house in their neighborhood, they decided to walk a few blocks to a different neighborhood. After all, with costumes, nobody's gonna know that they don't belong there. And they managed to finagle so much candy that they left pretty content. The boys went home and sat down on the porch to empty out their bags. They compared the candies they had, trades, how many Mars bars for Smarties, and so forth and so on. And one of them opened a candy bar and bit down on it. Redness oozed from his mouth and he cried out in agony. His parents rushed onto the porch to find that he had bitten into a razor blade and that he had sliced off his tongue that now lay on the porch in front of him. His mouth had several cuts otherwise. The ambulance came and took the boy to the hospital, where doctors managed to stitch up his mouth and reattach his, tongue. The police warned parents against allowing their offspring to trick-or-treat at the homes of people they don't know. Okay, I'm temporarily breaking my believe everything fun for a moment, because if you truly believe this urban legend, one of my former university profs would like to have words with you. Everyone and their mother has a story from a friend of someone finding tampered candy on Halloween night. But if you follow up on any of those, they're all totally hoaxes. No one is giving out tampered candy on Halloween or free restricted consumables, if you catch my drift. They're too expensive. In history, there's only been one case of someone deliberately poisoning Halloween candy, but it wasn't a random, little ones. It was Ronald O'Brien of Texas, who intentionally spiked his son's pixie sticks with cyanide, hoping to collect a huge insurance payout. He also gave the candy to 3 other young folks, hoping to cover his track, but apparently none of them liked pixie sticks, so none of them indulged. Now his son sadly passed away from the poisoning. Don't worry, Ronald received the death penalty and died via lethal injection in 1974. Oh, before I forget, there's a temporary tattoo variant to this tale, and I gotta tell it because it makes me laugh. So 2 girls, cousins, went trick-or-treating together every year. One year when they returned home, the girls were thrilled to discover they'd each received a unicorn temporary tattoo. Hey, I love unicorns. They showed the tattoos to their moms, who thought they were a clever idea to give to trick-or-treaters. The girls quickly applied the tattoos to their arms, and within a few minutes their moms noticed they were acting strangely. It was almost as if they were, intoxicated, or worse, drugged. The moms scooped up their daughters and rushed them to the hospital, where the doctors believed the girls were definitely under some sort of influence. The police confiscated all their candy, but the lab reports showed nothing wrong. The next day, after the 2 young girls had recovered, one of the moms was picking up her daughter's Halloween costume from the floor when she noticed the used tattoo packaging. She grabbed a plastic bag and took it to the police station. And what do you know? The lab report on the tattoo revealed it had been laced with a hallucinogenic substance. Folks, that's not possible. And if you believe that, it's on you. Number 2, Hail Mary. Does this game have a much more mainstream name? Sure. But the interweb doesn't like the B word at all, so bear with me here. It's a mixture of game and urban legend because honestly, who didn't try to summon this gal at least once back when they were in school? Don't lie to me and tell me on a Halloween night when you were middle school age, you didn't try. Originally in history, Mary wasn't summoned for the purpose of eye gouging or other macabre reasons. She was summoned to show a woman her future. You would do a candlelit ritual, and if executed correctly, you'd catch either a glimpse of your future husband's face or you're gonna see a skull, meaning you're gonna die before marriage. It's less horrifying, but way more depressing than today's version, if you ask me. Since I know this is what you're all waiting for, yes, we'll go through the ritual, urban legend, make of that what you will. For this mess, you need a mirror, candles, and matches or a lighter. You start the game by turning off all the lights in the house, or whatever room you're in. Arrange all the candles around the mirror except for whatever one you're gonna hold. You do need to have some light. May I recommend a candle holder? Wax hurts. Light all the candles. Once you're calm, close your eyes and begin spinning in a circle while chanting B-L-O-O-D-Y, Mary 13 times. You visualize her, and then after the 13th chant, open your eyes and voila! You're either gonna see her in the mirror, or you're gonna see nothing. Those who have allegedly seen her and survived her encounter have described her as a rotting skeletal figure with nothing more than redness-covered bones, long, sharp nails, some rotting flesh, and clumps of matted red hair. Some say she's eyeless, and others say she wears the eyes of her past victims. Most people I know haven't really ever seen her. But hey, others say that she will drag you into the mirror to live with her forever. Have fun. If that happens, let me know. Number 1. Killer in the backseat. Yep, I'm ending today with a classic trope. Late on a Halloween night, a nurse was driving home from work when she noticed a car that seemed to be following her. The driver began sporadically flashing the high beams on and off, and if you're not a driver, you don't understand just how bleeping annoying that can be. The nurse sped up, and the car behind her sped up as well. Now she called 911 and told the police that somebody was chasing her. The dispatcher told her to stop her car and get out of it immediately. The nurse thought the dispatcher had lost her mind, but just then a police car pulled in front of her, forcing her to stop. The dispatcher told her once more, get out and go to the police car. So she emerged from the car, and one of the police officers told her to get in the back seat of his car. She noticed that the two officers had their weapons drawn, and that the car that was following her had stopped several yards behind her. The nurse didn't know what to expect, like everything's racing through her mind, and the first cop walked towards the driver's side of her car, while the other moved around the passenger side. They stood with their weapons and flashlights aimed at the back seat. Hands up and get out of the car, one officer yelled. The nurse watched as the police officers dragged a man from the back seat of the car. Now she later discovered that the car flashing its lights was driven by a woman who noticed the man rise up from the back seat, holding what she thought was a stabby kitchen utensil. She immediately called 911, and each time the man was up from the back seat, the woman flashed her high beams to, get him to pop back down. Once again, similar to earlier, this preys on the fear of the backseat, so be careful folks. Also, what kind of driver doesn't notice something moving behind them in the window? Like if the other lady could see it, so could the driver. Number 5, the hook. Is this also a very common horror movie trope? Absolutely, and I love a good spooky movie. So let's dive into this tale together and then unpack it, shall we? So after leaving a friend's Halloween party, a boyfriend and girlfriend decided to drive the short distance to a favorite lake park. And the youngsters arrived at the spot to find it vacant, and of course, it was a beautiful romantic setting with a full moon shimmering on the water, ooh la la. Now, in modern versions of the tale, the boy scrolled through his playlist to find the perfect music, wink wink, when both of the duo's phones beeped with a police alert warning for everyone to be on the lookout for a man with a prosthetic hook who was seen fleeing the scene of a killing. The two teenagers realized the address of the crime scene was only a couple of blocks from where they were parked. Common sense kicked in and they decided to leave the park, but when they tried to start the car, the engine wouldn't turn over. They tried several times, and finally the engine coughed to life, and they hightailed it out of the park. So much for that romantic evening. They talked about their Halloween not ending quite the way they wanted, and the girlfriend suggested they go back to her house to watch a scary movie. When they arrived at her house, they parked in the driveway behind her parents' cars. The girlfriend got out and turned back to wait for her boyfriend, but hanging from her car door, dun dun dun, was a prosthetic hook, and dot dot dot. Now, I've heard a few versions of this tale, especially since having cell phones is a pretty modern version of the story, and a pretty PG version. As a gal who drives a vehicle, I always check the backseat and trunk of my SUV before I start driving, and that's mainly because I keep my work bag in the back seat, so I have no choice but to do so. It's a big work bag. Can we question how the killer got into the back seat without the duo noticing? Sure, but remember, Halloween night tonight, folks, and we like to suspend disbelief around here. To quote one of my favorite current internet references, being Delulu is the Solulu. Number 4, Spiderwig. I swear to all things in the universe, the stuff I talk about for your entertainment at the cost of my own fears should really be noted more. If you're new to my chaos, I'm so sorry, but spiders and I are not a good combination. So if you see me shuddering while telling this tale, it's not an act, it's real. Wanting an authentic costume for a Halloween party, a young woman headed up to the attic of her home to look through her trunk of old clothes. I get it, authenticity, been there. A 1920s fringe dress caught her eye, and she knew she had to wear it. Holding it up in front of herself, she danced around in the attic, stopping in front of a tall mirror. It was perfect. Amazing. She gazed at herself in the mirror and frowned at her hairstyle. It was all wrong. She needed like a bobbed hairdo, she wanted the accuracy. I appreciate the attention to detail, trust me, I'm a cosplayer. Suddenly, she remembered that she'd seen a wig at the bottom of the trunk, and she retrieved it and was about to, try it on when the doorbell rang. Clutching the wig and dress, she ran down the stairs to open the front door. And who was standing there? Nothing crazy yet, just her best friend, screaming, "Hey, we're gonna be late. I'll steam the wrinkles in the dress while you do your hair. We need to hurry." You know what, it sounds like me trying to corral my friends to go anywhere on time. I love one of my best friends, but you gotta give her that time that's like a half an hour different than everybody else so she's on time. So once our narrator was dressed, the woman was thrilled with her costume. The two left for the party giggling at how she looked like a 1920s gangster's mall. Now if you need context, because at first I was like, That term was used to describe the female companion of a male professional criminal. Mole tends to be used as a euphemism for a lady of the night, and I'm totally adding that to my interweb thesaurus. By the time the duo arrived at the party, the woman was kind of, scratching at the wig. Having never worn a wig before, she had no idea it could feel so itchy and crawly. Hey arachnophobes, skip ahead now. I'll see y'all at the next point. Don't worry. You good? Okay. So the duo had only been at the party for about 5 minutes when the crawling sensation became unbearable. Our narrator exclaimed, "This wig is so itchy, I don't think I can stand it for the rest of the night." Her friend looked at her and screamed, pointing at the wig as black spiders crawled out from underneath it. The woman shrieked as the spiders covered her face. She panicked and slapped at the spiders as they traveled down her arms, and she jerked the wig from her head and threw it on the floor. A sea of baby spiders burst from the wig, scattering everywhere, and the partygoers, screamed and ran from the room. It seems as if a spider had spun a nest inside the wig, and the little creepy crawlies had all hatched in time for the Halloween costume party. The poor woman ran from the party, and in her absence, was actually awarded first place for the creepiest Halloween Spider-Woman costume. Excuse me, I need a moment to recover mentally from that visual. Rhea Ripley, Rhea Ripley, Rhea Ripley. Hey look, a girl can dream. As a cosplayer and character performer, I've definitely worn my fair share of questionable wigs in this lifetime, and sure, some of them have been itchy, or just plain old uncomfortable, but I can't say I've ever found anything other than a straight bobby pin or glitter in one. Oh wait, you know what? Never mind, I did find a pine cone in one last weekend, but that was a colleague playing a practical joke. Long story. Do I believe this tale could actually happen? Sure. Here's a common enough fear, finding a body under the bed. So like vacation couples, newlyweds, Disneyland guests, all have been the subject of an urban legend involving hotel occupants who blissfully fall asleep, only to wake up to an awful stench coming from either under the bed or inside the mattress. Closer inspection reveals that a dead body has been stashed away, presumably not anybody who's died of natural causes. Now this traveling tale has been confirmed multiple times over. At least a dozen newspaper stories have detailed hotel rooms that have doubled as body disposal sites. While the smell is usually apparent right away, at least one couple slept on a mattress containing a body in Atlantic City back in 1999. Cases in Colorado, Florida, and Virginia have also been reported. In 2010, guests at a budget lodge in Memphis were horrified to discover that they had been sleeping above the body of Sonny Millbrook, who was reported missing at the time. Fabric softener had been stuffed in the ceiling tiles to try and mask the smell, and at least 3 other occupants had also rented the room since the disappearance, which, yikes. A court eventually convicted Millbrook's boyfriend, like Keith Moody, of the crime. More recently, and by that I mean just last year, a tourist named Mr. Zong checked into a hotel in Tibet when he was made aware of a smell that was so bad that he was like, "Can I change rooms?" And 2 days later, after he had been granted the room transfer, he learned the source of the smell because he was summoned back to the original room by a group of police officers. He was like, "Yo, what's going on?" And they were like, so somebody's died." He's like, "Okay, where?" They're like, just under the bed." The police mentioned that they had opened an investigation, but our guy wasn't a suspect because the body had been lying there for days before his arrival. So, great. New fear unlocked while traveling. Just gonna put that right under my fear of bedbugs. So we've all heard about some sort of boogeyman legend, right? The mythical creature that's gonna steal young humans who misbehave or whatever. So for years, young folks living in and around Staten Island kind of had goosebumps rising because of the tale of Cropsy, a boogeyman who lived in the woods and made a nocturnal habit of disemboweling anybody he stole. Parents were like, "Okay, come on, honey. That's no such thing. It's not true." Well, turns out it was real. Cropsy would drag humans from their beds, carrying a red-soaked axe in the crook of his arm, and well, ... The true identity of Cropsy was that of Andre Rand, born Frank Russian. In 1987, he was put on trial and convicted for abduction. Turns out he was connected to the rash of disappearances in the 1970s. He had a total of 5 notable alleged victims: Alice Pereira, Holly Ann Hughes, Tyahese Jackson, Hank Gaforio, and Jennifer Schweiger. He had once worked at Willowbrook, a defunct mental institution. Now, while he denied involvement in other cases, it's pretty clear that his activities had a heavy influence in the word-of-mouth stories that followed. Some folks even speculate that he was a Satanist who took the lives for his sacrifices, and that he wasn't working alone. Yay. Here's a legend that terrifies me: rats in your toilet. These hardy rodents can climb, swim, and wriggle through tiny spaces with amazing agility. However, someone who has just been bitten on the butt while trying to use the bathroom might not be so impressed. Rats' superpowers are near mythical. They can swim for 3 days, they can fit through holes the size of a quarter. They're highly skilled at running and climbing both horizontally and vertically across pipes, drains, and along surfaces, which are just some of the ways that rats can use drains to their advantage. In addition to these capabilities, rats can also swim up to half a mile across the water in one go, and even dive through the water to enter exposed pipes and find their way into a toilet bowl. This means that rats can easily climb up drains, which is aided by the presence of water where they can swim. And once a rat has decided it wants to enter your home, it can easily swim and climb up the U-bend of a toilet to gain entry to the toilet bowl, which is also possible for rats, who climb up drainage systems from the outside. And hey, fun fact, despite our long human history with lab rats, we know very little about the lives of the rats in our homes. If we're gonna consult the experts, veterinary scientist Chelsea Hemsworth said in an interview that we probably know more about the ecology of polar bears than we do about rats. One of the most important findings of the Vancouver Rat Project has been that rats form highly stable family groups or colonies, block by block in any study. And when people break up rat families, say by trapping or poisoning, the remaining rats are forced to move, and that's when they tend to spread disease. Yeah, no thank you, absolutely not. Here's a doozy for us to end our day with, using real corpses as props. Notorious outlaw Elmer McCurdy took on a second life following his death, because in 1911, the embalmed corpse of McCurdy became a grim sideshow attraction throughout Texas, with people eager to see the famed criminal on display in funeral parlors and carnivals. Though it's hard to document all of his travels, he eventually wound up in Long Beach, California, where someone apparently mistook him for a prop. He was hung in a funhouse at the New Pike amusement park, his humanity discovered only after a crew member on the $6 Million Man, which was filming there in 1976, tried to adjust him, and they dislodged what was a very real arm. The following year, thankfully, his corpse was put to proper rest. Which, by the way, he's not the only real corpse that's been used for entertainment. Have you ever been on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland? Now, I'm pretty sure the Florida version only houses prop replicas, but the California ride originally featured genuine real-life skeletal bones. They were provided by the UCLA Medical Center and placed around various locations throughout the attraction, so the morbid incorporation of actual human remains came from the Walt Disney Company's perpetual strides towards perfection and authenticity. Long story short, the technology at the time just wasn't up to par for producing realistic enough fake ones. Fortunately, don't worry, that's no longer the case. Disney has since replaced most of the real bones with realistic fake ones. But there's at least one skull that is still very much the real deal. Apparently, you'll find it in the captain's quarters on the headboard behind the dead man's skeleton in the bed with a magnifying glass and map. Some sources say there are other real bones still present in the attraction, so feel free to keep a close eye next time you visit the park. I know I will when I'm visiting soon. The phrase "walk a mile in my shoes" takes on chilling connotations when the shoes are probably made of real human skin. And although the creation of such a pair sounds so gruesome as to be unbelievable, these shoes exist and are displayed at the Carbon County Museum in Rawlins, Wyoming, where additional items reveal more of the story of the mysterious outlaw, Big-Nosed George Parrott. So what led to him to such a grisly end? Well, even before he died, this man was known for frontier crimes. He had been arrested for horse theft, tried by a justice of the peace, and acquitted. He was also believed to have kept headquarters in the hole-in-the-wall country west of present-day Casey, Wyoming, with a number of other outlaws at the time. So, not a good man. He developed a reputation for stealing from travelers on stagecoaches, and then progressed to train robberies. Specifically, in August of 1878, Big-Nosed George and his gang, which included Dutch Charlie Burris, planned a theft from the Union Pacific Railroad pay car near Como, Wyoming, east of Medicine Bow. At that time, the UPRR carried cash via the pay car monthly for its own company payroll. So the bandits loosened a spike on the rails, wrapped it with telegraph wire, and hid in the bush, planning to tug the spike and dislodge the rails to derail the train so they could steal away with the money. But sharp-eyed railroad employees spotted the wobbly spike, repaired the damage, and alerted lawmen before the train arrived. So Big-Nosed George and his men fled to Rattlesnake Canyon at the base of Elk Mountain, about 25 miles southwest of the crime. Carbon County Sheriff's Deputy Robert Widowfeld and Union Pacific Detective Henry Tip Vincent tracked them there, but the outlaws killed them. So Big-Nosed George and his gang were later reported to have stolen several $1,000s in cash from a Miles City, Montana territory merchant named Con, when in spring of 1879, Con accompanied the military paymaster's wagon train from nearby Fort Keogh to Bismarck, Dakota territory. Now, Con was traveling to the east on a purchasing errand. The soldiers were headed to the North Pacific Railroad to retrieve funds to be distributed at the fort. One account indicates that the criminals apparently bragged in the Miles City bars about their recent successful exploits, including the Wyoming Territory killings. Someone wired Carbon County Sheriff James Rankin, who headed to Montana in July of 1880, and brought Big-Nosed George back to Wyoming Territory. Two other members of the gang had also just escaped. Rankin escorted his charge first to Laramie, and then rode with him on the train heading to Rawlins. On September 13th of 1880, Big-Nosed George was arraigned in Rawlins. He told his lawyer his name was George Francis Warden, and reported his birth date as being in April 1843 in Dayton, Ohio. He first entered a guilty plea, then changed his plea to not guilty. And then on November 16th, the jury was sworn, and 2 days later, George again changed his plea. Back to guilty. Okay, make up your mind, dude. A motion was filed for arrest of judgment and sentencing, and the court took this under advisement, but denied the motion on December 15th. Now at that time, death by rope necklace was the punishment for those found guilty of taking a life, and Big Nose George was sentenced to hang on April 2nd. 10 days before the scheduled execution, though, he tried to escape from the local jail. Like, I don't blame him. You wanna, make out with your life. He had used a pocket weapon to saw through the rivets on the heavy leg shackles that bound him, and struck jailer Robert Rankin in the head with them. Now, Rankin's wife, Rosa, discovered the attempted jailbreak and managed to close the outside door, thwarting Big Nose George's plans. She fired her husband's revolver in the air, and the men came running to help. Big Nose George's hands were tied behind his back, and that's when he wound up with the noose around his neck. The mob made him stand on an empty barrel, tossed a rope over the crossbar of a telegraph pole, but the rope broke, so George fell and was begging to just please end it, stop tormenting me, this is not fun. But instead the mob was like, no, we're gonna replace the noose, and this time you're gonna climb a 12-foot ladder. So this time, with the repaired leg irons weighing him down, climbing was difficult for George. And finally, he, to death. One report estimated a crowd of as many as 200 people gathered to watch. Nobody came forward to claim the body, but Dr. Osborne, who had been asked to be present to ensure the outlaw, died, and another Rawlins doctor, Thomas McGee, a Union Pacific Railroad physician and surgeon, claimed the corpse for medical study. Osborne made a death mask and had the outlaw skinned, and the shoe was made. McGee studied the criminal's brain, and Big Nose George's skull was cut into 2 pieces. McGee gave the top half to his protege, Lillian Heath, who later became Wyoming's first female physician, so congrats to her. The lower skull half was buried in a whiskey barrel with the rest of the outlaw's bones. In 1950, the whiskey barrel was discovered in Rawlins when workers were excavating for a new department store at 5th and Cedar Streets, and the skull halves were briefly reunited and then split up again. So the skull cap is now housed at the Union Pacific Railroad Museum in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and the lower half of the skull is displayed at the Carbon County Museum in Rawlins. I don't think I personally own anything made of animal products, and I don't feel like owning anything made up of human remains anytime soon. I'll leave that to my buddy Mysteria. He owns a collection of skulls, fingers, you name it.
The ghost children of Arroyo Seco. Now, they play by the riverbank at dusk, barefoot, soaking wet, laughing softly as they skip stones across the surface. And if you get too close, they'll invite you to play. Now, locals near Arroyo Seco, just north of Teos, speak of children who haunt a bend in the river. The story goes that in the 1940s, a school bus swerved off a narrow bridge during a really bad storm and crashed into the river. To this day, hikers and locals say they've seen ghostly children by the water, always in very small groups, always near sundown. One man says he heard giggling while he was fishing alone. He turned and actually saw a group of children watching him from the opposite bank. He then waved at them. They actually waved back. Then one of them stepped into the river and then vanished, without a splash, nothing. Now, another woman was walking her dog when she saw a small barefoot girl standing on the trail. The girl looked lost, so she actually bent down to ask if she needed help. Now, the girl said, "Can you find my bus?" Then disappeared into the trees. Her dog refused to move for several minutes, whining and just shaking uncontrollably. Now, even more disturbing are the stories of people hearing their own names called by children's voices, very faint, echoing, and always just out of view somehow. Some believe the children are harmless, while others think, they're trying to pull people into the river to join them. Ghost hunters who have investigated the area report very odd EMF readings, unexplained splashing sounds, and sun and cold spots, but they all agree on one thing. The air near the part of the river feels a lot heavier, like someone is watching you, like someone is waiting. La Llorona of the Organ Mountains. Now, she walks the trails barefoot, draped in white, her long black hair hiding her face. You hear her before you see her, crying softly and whispering, "Now, ¿dónde están mis hijos?" which is her saying, "Where are my children?" La Llorona, the weeping woman. Her story is told across Latin America, but in New Mexico, especially in the jagged shadows of the Organ Mountains, her legend feels terrifyingly real. One hiker said he was exploring the Aguirre Springs Trail alone just before dusk when he heard a woman sobbing behind him. He actually turned around. No one was there. The crying grew louder and louder. He started running, but the sound stayed right behind him until it suddenly just stopped. When he got to his car, the windows were fogged from the inside and his back seat was soaking wet. Another group of campers said they saw a woman in white drifting along the edge of their campsite late one night. Now, she was hovering a few inches off the ground. One of them tried to approach her, thinking maybe she needed help, but she turned to look at him and her face was bloated and blue, her mouth wide open in a very unnatural scream. The man literally collapsed. When he woke up, his boots were filled to the top with water. It hadn't rained there in days. Now, some say La Llorona is the spirit of a woman who did something terrible in a fit of rage and was cursed to wander forever in search of her missing children. Now, others believe she's more than a ghost, that she's more like a warning, a punishment, or a trap for the lost and lonely. And in the stillness of the desert, where sound travels for miles and shadows stretch like claws, her presence feels like more than just a story. Now, whether you believe in her or not, one thing is certain: the Organ Mountains are beautiful during the day, but when the sun sets and the trails go quiet, no one hikes there alone. So next time you find yourself in New Mexico, keep your eyes open and your instincts very sharp, because in a land where, the deceased never rest and the past kind of just goes into the present, legends don't stay legends for long. They come knocking. They stand in the road, they cry by the water, they follow you home.